Great. Good evening, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting of June 19th, 2014. Our Town Administrator, Dave Williams, will read the agenda now.
First, we'll have vote to approve or amend the agenda and add topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance, and then a public comment period, and then consideration of Town Council contract for fiscal year 2015, which begins July 1st, 2014. And then consideration of committee charges, appointments, and related business, including a charge for the committee from Selectman DeSorga, who was at our last meeting from Medfield, the Public Safety Committee charge, which we've talked about, and staff and committee appointments, and authorize a not-to-exceed funding for a possible grant writer in regards to the Town Water Options Committee. Then we'll talk about consideration of reserve fund transfers, and discussion regarding policies involving employee professional development and reimbursements. And then under the Town Administrator report, we'll list update on current action items and capital items. Then Selectmen reports. There are no minutes to approve, and there's no warrant to approve, and we will set the next meeting.
Okay, very good. Anybody have anything to add to the agenda?
No, unless we wanted to add the chief to the agenda as opposed to the public
Sure.
comment period.
We can add the chief to the agenda
To
and
allow him
put
the
it,
amount of time that he might
sure,
need.
put him in ahead of the public comment period. That makes sense. We have a motion on that. Second?
moved.
All in
Second.
favor? Aye, okay. So Chief Thompson is added to the agenda as the next item.
Otherwise, I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Great. It's approved. And Chief Thompson, tell us why you're here, and we're happy to have you. And also thank you for your hard work yesterday.
Absolutely. As you're all well aware by now, the police department responded to what clearly is one of the most disturbing calls we ever want to receive as police professionals. We received a call yesterday in the early afternoon from Pine Hill staff reporting that a student had seen an individual with a gun on the campus. So, as I've mentioned time and time again, we have limited resources in the Sherborn Police Department. So, myself and the two officers that were available patrolling the town, Lieutenant Bento and Officer Stickney, immediately responded to the school. Our response time is always going to be critical. We responded within a minute to the school. Lieutenant Bento went to the rear of the school through the cemetery. Myself and Officer Stickney went up Pine Hill, and we went to the actual campus. Officer Stickney and I went to the rear of the school, where we made a phone call to the superintendent, who happened to be at the school yesterday. We had the superintendent bring a first grade student to a secure location so we could identify where the student thought that they had seen this person with a firearm. The student pointed out the location. Myself and Officer Stickney decided to do a cursory search of the wood line at the rear of the school just to make certain that there wasn't an immediate threat to the staff or the students. We spent approximately 10 to 15 minutes in the woods, making certain that there wasn't anybody in the immediate area. I then made the decision to pull myself and Officer Stickney back to the rear of the school to secure the perimeter while we waited for resources. We received support from the town of Natick, the town of Dover, and the Massachusetts State Police. It took approximately a half an hour to get enough resources at the school so that we were able to do a very thorough search of the wood line in the cemetery behind Pine Hill. We had Lieutenant Dave Ray from the State Police who showed up on scene. He acted solely as support for me. I communicated constantly with Stephen Bliss. As a matter of fact, Stephen Bliss came out to our command post. We made certain that we were informing the parents of what was transpiring as quickly as we were getting enough information to share with parents. Stephen Bliss did a tremendous job using Connect Ed to make all the parents aware of what was going on. He communicated exactly what he was telling parents to me. Again, I can't stress enough how well the communication went. Ultimately, we received canine support from the Natick Police Department, canine support from the state police, and air wing support, a helicopter from the state police. We spent well over an hour utilizing the helicopter overhead as the eye in the sky, while officers and dogs went through the woods to make certain that there wasn't an individual in or around the campus. When we were certain that there wasn't a threat, we decided to release the lockdown. But prior to releasing the lockdown, we actually went through the school in pairs of 2. So myself and actually a Sherborn resident, Lieutenant Mike Richards with the Massachusetts State Police, who, by the way, came out on scene because he has children that go to the school. He and I went through a certain wing of the school. We entered every doorway, every area that you could think of in that school to make certain there wasn't a threat inside the school. We actually went into the classrooms and made certain that, number one, all the students felt safe, the staff felt safe, and we wanted to make sure that we could account for all the kids that were in the school. And frankly, Lieutenant Richards, as I mentioned, a town resident, was actually very calming for the students, a lot of the students, because they know Mike, and they were actually saying, "Mr. Richards, Mr. Richards." So that really helped to alleviate, some of the fear that some of the kids were experiencing. When we completed a complete search at the school, we communicated with Stephen Bliss and decided to release the lockdown. We stayed on campus until the buses came to either remove the students from the school or parents came to pick up the children individually. I shared in a debriefing with the superintendent and the school staff. The school staff did an incredible job. Chief Morrissey was also involved in this endeavor. A lot of the students were brought to the fire station downtown. We made certain that they were secure at the fire station. And frankly, I really have to give kudos to the residents, the fire personnel, Sean Colleen, Rick Aston, Jonathan Douse. They were all there to help block off some of the roadways. The parents were tremendous at Station 1 at the firehouse, helping to calm a lot of the kids down, assisting the short amount of staff that we had. I really have to give kudos to the parents. They were really respectful throughout this process. They were completely understanding. The kids were incredible. It was almost too seamless. That's what I'll say.
Good, well, great. It's great that everything worked out, and it shows you what a town we have where people can all chip in like that to make sure things go as best they can.
Right, absolutely.
Thanks to you and your men, and I don't know if Paul has things to say, or Peter?
Yeah, sure. I got things to say. The safety of our children is paramount. The safety of our teachers and our staff, that's paramount. The safety of our parents and residents, that's paramount. And fortunately, this turned out not to be an actual episode or event, but it provided a wonderful opportunity for additional training and for testing our preparedness.
Right.
Because I know you've been working on this for a year or 2 years now to get the schools ready and get your own department ready. So it seems from my point of view that all that preparation paid off. From your point of view, would you say the same, or?
Absolutely. Like I said, it was almost too seamless, and I'm certainly not minimizing the incident, but I'd call it the perfect storm. We had half of the school on Jameson Field, and then we had the other half of the school inside the building. So it was an opportunity for us to make certain that the teachers and the administrative staff knew exactly what to do in this type of situation, and they followed it to a T. I mean, it was literally borderline perfect.
Thank you.
Welcome.
On behalf of myself, the board, the community.
It was
all the
a
citizens of the town.
complete community effort, and I have to say, and I failed to mention this earlier, our desk officer, Paul Van Vliet, was inundated with phone calls, and, you know, I've mentioned this in the past, there is no more important job than the desk officer in a small community. He was taking phone calls from the media. I mean, the media was picking up on this literally within 5 minutes. He was taking phone calls from parents, concerned parents. He was getting direction from me. He was, you know, being told to contact this agency, make sure we contact the state police. He was taking phone calls that were, you know, business-related on top of all that. I mean, he did an incredible job, and I couldn't be more proud of my personnel.
But while there was some inconvenience to parents and children and all of that, I think all of us should feel safer. The moral of this episode is that it's shown to all our parents and students and to the world, we are ready. If there was a real threat, I feel more comfortable today after seeing how well this went than before.
And just to add to it, ironically, Sergeant Luke Tedstone and Officer Chad Smith are actually in Georgia this week, and they're going through active shooter instructor class as we speak. So Sergeant Tedstone had texted me to, you know, obviously he was concerned with what was going on, and I've decided that he's now a jinx, so he'll never be able to leave the state again. But
Well, I would only echo what my colleagues here say. You know, we met this morning, and I was glad to meet with you, and then I went home and I was talking to my son. I was telling him a little bit about what transpired yesterday, and one of the points I made to him was, you know, geez, these guys are great guys, you know, I'd be thrilled to go out and have a beer with the chief, but when it comes time to be a pro, you and your team go to it right away, and I take a lot of comfort from that. As Paul says, public safety is most important from my perspective up here, so I'm real proud of you and your team. I'm proud to hear how the Chief Morrissey and his team pulled together on this, and the school was well prepared, I think, under Superintendent Bliss and the administration there. They're all pulling. The kids sounded like they were just terrific, which, you know, if the kids weren't great, the whole dynamic of what you were having to deal with, I think, could have been different and more complicated. So I was very pleased to hear that. Also pleased you didn't have to use the access road, but in a different time, in a different place, it sounded like that could have come into play.
yeah, unfortunately, because of the location of where the student, you know, thought they saw this person, we pretty much had to lock down
Lock
that
that
area.
off, yep.
And it wouldn't have been safe to utilize the new access
Right.
road.
Right, good.
And I would say also thanks to our neighbors in Dover and Natick. You described how they helped out. It's great to know you can count on the neighbors to come through, and I'm sure vice versa.
Absolutely, and I've mentioned this before, you'd be really surprised to see how easily agencies mesh when these incidents happen. We're all trained, you know, to the same standards across the state, and we're all interchangeable. I've mentioned this before. You could take any one of my personnel, and they could work in one of the, you know, most dynamic metropolises in the country. No question.
That's great. I think we had some public questions or comments.
Well, I was going to ask is what Peter had alluded to as far as the emergency access road, whether you utilized it and how helpful it was, but you've already answered me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, question for the chief. Just what was this? Did you get your man, and what was this really? Somebody up there walking the dog, or what?
Well, Billy, this is an ongoing investigation. We have a few more people to interview, so at this
No
point...
comment at this time.
Well, not no comment, it's just an ongoing investigation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have sign up for?
We have one person signed up, Susan Tyler, Western
Right,
Ave,
Mrs. Tyler.
regarding public comment.
Go to it.
My comment is on public comment. I see that, I know that I had brought it up last week when you were, for the first time, limiting public comment to 10 minutes, and I was wondering if there was a policy procedure. Now I see you've done this.
At your suggestion, yes.
Yes, absolutely. But now I do have a question regarding that you have to sign up prior to 6 PM. How long before will it be available for people to show up? If public comment actually doesn't start until 6 o'clock. So are you saying people have to be here before the meeting starts? And it will be available an hour ahead of time, a half an hour? Or can it be available prior to the meeting up until 6:05 when you call public comment?
We were planning to make it available tonight. We had it up there 15 minutes before the start of the...
Yeah, but I think if somebody came in and wanted to sign up and they weren't here right at 6, yeah, of course it's available.
Okay, good, well, that's what I'm asking, where is it gonna be? I mean, you're instituting this, and I think it's wonderful you now have a sign-up sheet, so everybody that wants a chance has a chance. But again, is it gonna be here 5 minutes ahead of time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes ahead of time? Is it gonna be downstairs an hour ahead? Or is it available up until you call public comment?
Let's say we'll try to have it in the selectman's office that afternoon and then up here until public comment starts. How's
And
that?
anywhere else that
Yeah, that's
I've been,
fine.
they've, at the start of the meeting, the sheet is pulled and it goes up
Correct,
to
at
the
the
board.
start of, yeah.
At
That's
the
fine,
start
that's
of the
fine.
meeting.
I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
the point is just to put some type of a limit so our meetings don't get turned into just public comment sessions and we can get our business done. Tonight, it's obviously not a problem. Some other times, there's been a lot of comment and it's stretched on, so we're just trying to put some parameters on that.
Voice that
That's
for
fine.
those that watch these things,
Yeah.
because people do watch.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, in a better world, we'd have interactive, people could text us or phone in with messages during the meeting, but we don't have that set
You
up,
don't want
so.
that, no, don't go there.
Sure, Twitter.
Don't go there.
Oh, there's plenty of places that do electronic comment. You vote for your favorite selectman, vote for your favorite town employee. We could do ongoing tallies. There's lots of stuff you
We
could do.
can tweet live.
Best tie,
Yeah, of course.
That's fine.
Best lack of time.
there you go.
Yeah, there we go. All right, let's go on to the next item, which is consideration of town council contract for fiscal year 2015.
As you know, we met with town council last year, and they agreed to hold their rate the same for if we decided to continue with their contract. So the contract that they're proposing is the same as the existing contract with the same rate. And then the first 2 pages of the package show their estimates on what the estimated savings is when you figure in the discounts that they're claiming. So for the current fiscal year, they just had $200 on there, but the overall total discount since they've been our council since 2010, they're saying is close to $69,000.
So David, this discount that they've calculated for the current fiscal year is through, it looks like it's through the end of March, is that right?
Yes, it looks like March.
Okay, so it's a 3/4 of the year. And the negative number means that there were months, I guess many months, where we went over the standard amount or the assumed amount, and then there were a couple of months where we were under, but the adjusted is a negative for general services, and then for the town meeting type services, we had a positive, at least that
Right.
far. But that doesn't include town meeting itself, so we have to assume it may end up evening out on that level, too. We had a fair amount of litigation last year.
Yes.
But that wouldn't go, I don't think litigation would go into
Doesn't,
this
The
okay.
retainer
discount,
fee.
because that's just on the retainer.
This is just the retainer, okay, very good.
Right, yeah. So what it shows so far is we haven't overused them as we might have. If I were in their shoes, I'd think that they were providing more service than they're being compensated for, because we were 68 grand ahead of retainer in the first 3 years of the relationship, 3 or 4 years of the
4
relationship.
years, yeah, right.
And this year, it looks like we're breaking even, but like you say, it doesn't cover some of the heavy period that we would have encountered for town meeting and since.
Right.
So eventually, so David, I didn't have last year's contract, so this is the amount they agreed to, the 55,000, sounds right.
Right.
And the services that they listed, which they say aren't necessarily complete nor restricting them either way, are probably the same verbiage we had in the last contract?
Yes.
Is that correct? And the hourly rates are the same as we had last year for
Yes.
extra services beyond retainer or core services? Okay.
I had a question too, David, on page,
I also wanted to note that council couldn't make it tonight,
Okay.
but if you had specific questions for her, she could make it to the next meeting on the
Okay.
27th.
so on page 3, it references the law firm also agrees to provide one free seminar at Town Hall each year on a topic to be agreed upon between the client and the law firm on request of the client. Have we had that seminar for this past year?
No.
Is there a topic that we should be asking for a seminar on? I mean, I wonder if that's something it's a freebie, but maybe it's something that's worth,
Well, annually, it's always good to go over the open meeting law, conflict of interest law, and procurement laws. Those are things that
with department heads and board heads or
committees,
things
yeah,
like
they
that,
could
yeah.
have an open seminar, but no, we haven't asked them to do
So
anything.
I would suggest if we're going to renew this contract with that term in it, that, why don't we try to figure out a seminar we can ask them to put on in the third quarter of the year or the fourth quarter of the year this year?
Mhm.
Or maybe even, maybe even sooner.
Okay. Actually, it would be good, after we finish up all the appointments and you have a new round of members on committees.
So just do it right away.
Yeah, that would be good, by the end of the summer, maybe.
This doesn't restrict us. If we, particularly in Section 2B, the hourly legal services, we're not restricted to use them necessarily, by the way I read this. Would that be a fair statement? If we decide we want to use some other counsel expert in whatever the matter might
No.
be.
No, you can, the selectmen can name whoever they want to as counsel.
Okay. And we can terminate at any time if we want, so there's no long-term commitment, not that I see. I think, David, you'd speak better because I know you've interacted with Barbara over the last year and her team quite frequently. And I'm sure you would say, certainly on the retainer side or the basic town council services, that and from what I've seen, the service has been exemplary.
For the number of times
Served
we
well.
contact them, which is, I would say, a couple of times every week, maybe even some weeks 3 or 4 times, covering 3 attorneys, one with land use, one with personnel, and Barbara with, just general
Yeah.
issues. We get very good turnaround. I mean,
Yeah,
very quick
you've
turnaround.
been served
so.
well, yeah, and the advice and whatnot's been useful, yeah.
My experience, the times I've had to contact town council on things that have come up in the past year, is you get a phone call back as soon as possible. It's very good service as a client.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody else have any comments? No?
Nope.
Do we have a motion? to-
I'll move to approve this agreement for legal services. Looks like all 3 of us are supposed to sign it.
Second?
I'm abstaining.
All's abstaining. I will second the contract. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. So by abstaining, you don't want to sign either, is that right, or? Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So David, our next topic is, sorry, Paul.
Excuse
The
me.
committee charge, I think, isn't it?
Yes. We contacted Selectman Disorder, who was in last week, talking about sort of an intermunicipal regional committee to look at sharing of services, equipment, various things. It seemed to be still in a conceptual form. The board expressed interest in participating in that, which Selectman Disorder appreciated. But he didn't have any specific charge nor name for the committee, but he was proposing this name, Informational Service and Equipment Sharing Committee. I think I have named it, I might have named it some sort of regional, intermunicipal regional committee. But we don't really have a name or a charge right now.
Okay.
So-
I mean, we heard from him what he thought the charge was. It sounded pretty open-ended in terms of looking at opportunities with a half dozen or more of the neighboring towns. I think he had 3 or 4 already signed up, and he was going to make the rounds to several others.
Right.
And he asked for us to have one representative, and he said different municipalities were doing it different ways. Some were just appointing a citizen at large, some were appointing a member of a existing committee or a selectman, and some were appointing a town staff person.
Right. So you could do, you could appoint any of those, or you could appoint me to find a town resident to bring a name back to you, or or you could just name me or designee, and I can find that designee to be that person.
Yeah, I like the idea of having you involved in identifying somebody for this and being at the fulcrum of trying to identify opportunities for regionalization, but I also don't know that it's a good idea to put another actual committee role on your shoulders, and take you away from other things you'd be doing instead at Town Hall. So that's my
Yeah, no,
suggestion.
I like the idea of him finding someone, a citizen, to serve on this committee, bring it, one or more individuals back who are interested in doing that. I think there's a whole host of folks out there that could add value to that process. I think, I agree with Mike, I don't know that you being there is the right use of your time at this stage of the game, nor do I necessarily think one of us being there is the right use of our time at this stage. You know,
Right.
that might change, but.
There are a fair number of people who have taken a look at some aspects of regionalization, have thought a lot about it. We've got a lot of, volunteer effort in town that's been devoted to trying to identify these opportunities as part of the budget process or just as recommendations to the town. I don't know, Paul, what you think about this as an opportunity for the town to participate in something like this?
Well, I think I said at last meeting, when the guy was here, that I'm in support of this 100%. I think we should pursue this. I've been supporting regionalization for more than a decade. The problem has always been finding a partner who's willing to regionalize and having the buy-in from people in the town. So I like the idea of having the town administrator do some legwork to find a person, but I would request that you advertise the opportunity
Okay.
generally so that people out there can come forward. And to some extent, it would be really wonderful if we had some fresh blood. Oftentimes, we have the same people doing the same things, just taking on more jobs. We could expand the roster of people who are volunteering for the town by having somebody else with a fresh pair of eyes. That would be wonderful.
So do we want to make this a Board of Selectmen appointment where I put, somebody on the agenda, come back in, and you directly appoint them, or
I wasn't looking at it that way. I don't know what Paul and Peter think.
were you appointing me to find that designee
That's what I
and
thought.
advertise for that designee?
That's what I would
Okay.
prefer, but
Well, that takes
I
care
don't
of
have
it.
a preference either way. I mean, I like to maybe have some input in that,
Right.
But what
so.
we worked out with the last board, when we were talking about appointments by the town administrator, was appointments subject to disapproval by the board. So if he wants to suggest somebody, I think we should have the right to disapprove it if we,
Yeah, I mean, I can't envision when, why, or who,
Right.
where that would happen, but it's just good to be in the loop, in part because I think it's a pretty important role for someone in the town to take on here, and so our being in the loop is important for
Right.
that.
So
I think
we'll-
yeah.
well, we'll plan on that. I'll do the legwork and bring that person back in as the recommended person, and then you review and vote that appointment.
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, that's what it's sounding like to me that you
that sounds
want.
like the consensus here. I mean,
Yeah.
I would, I guess, I would be equally comfortable with you just identifying somebody and telling us, here you go, I've got somebody, they've already attended a meeting and they're off to the races, but if my, my colleagues want to have
I only
more
say
of a
that, Mike,
veto, or not a veto, but a review power, that's fine too.
Right, okay.
it's more just
Well, I'm fine with that.
creating
because-
greater, add a boy or add a girl for
Right.
somebody stepping up on this,
Yeah.
as opposed to, no, not you, you know.
Well, it does give them an
And
extra
I respect
backing
your
when they go
judgment.
to,
Right. Yeah, and we certainly are interested in the
Yeah.
process that unfolds from there. And on Paul's comment, he makes a great comment about involving more people in town government. And then I can also look at that the other way too and say, particularly on this subject, somebody who really knows the workings of the town and has been on the inside at least a little bit would probably, or I think may have a better understanding of both where there could be opportunities and how things work and what the politics are. But maybe not. Maybe fresh eyes are equally helpful. I don't know.
Yeah, I think knowing the inner workings, there's some merit to that, yes.
just, I'll make a pitch now that anybody interested in serving on any committee or just getting involved should come forward, because we have a number of vacancies across the board. And still looking, we still haven't heard from a number of people who are active seats on boards.
I looked on the website, I know we have that list that just indicates the different committees and groups that have vacancies,
Right.
but it's not clear how many and that sort of thing. I wonder if we should show that as
Yeah,
well
I have that, you can,
on the website, or is it,
I have it tonight for you to review.
okay.
And then we can post this if,
Because that might be helpful if somebody says, okay, they need one person for just a little more information for the person that's looking down the à la carte menu, if you will,
Right,
of
right.
committees to go on. We want them to know what they're signing up for, or
Right.
encouraging them to
Right.
sign up.
So
Do we
as-
have forms available, like when people come in to buy their Farm Pond sticker and other things? Are they offered an opportunity to sign up to
No, but that's a
participate
good
in town
idea.
government? Yeah, I mean, I was on another municipality's website recently. They had something called the Talent Bank form, in which I guess anybody who wanted to could fill out a form for the Talent Bank, and then it would be drawn on when they had an
Yeah.
opening.
That's a good idea, because we usually see the same faces over and over in town hall, except for those once or twice a year when they're either paying their taxes or getting their Farm Pond sticker. And those are, new faces coming in, and no, we haven't, but we should be giving them something to take with them to, at least some sort of material.
Yeah,
Just picking up on your comment there about talent banks, that was something that I had helped put together for another town, and it consisted of a little box of index cards with all these names in there. And then when a committee was being formed, they would organize a committee, and then the little box would show up, and they'd start to go through all these volunteers who had volunteered. And sometimes people volunteer for a specific committee, but oftentimes people say, anywhere I can help the town, and so on. So you kind of go through those, lay the cards on the table, and you're able to put together a committee. You have to call the people and ask them if they're still interested.
mhm.
The idea is you hold the cards for a while,
Always hold your cards, yes.
but you put them in that bank. The point of the reason for the reference to the bank is that it goes in there. It's like a deposit.
Sure.
You fill out your form, it gets deposited in this bank, and it's there on file. And you actually get called. The whole point of it is not to go to your same old people. We're all comfortable with the same people because we work with them. We're just going to rotate seats on all the different committees. But you get in a fresh face. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to participate in the government and get invested in the community.
Great, that's a great idea. Elliot, you've got a...
Yeah, I was going to suggest this regionalization committee. You might want a former selectman or advisory committee member, because they know the town government and the finances that are involved. And so that's my comment. That would be good.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, I think we're on to the next subject, David.
The next one, we've been talking, I think it predates me, about the possibility of forming a public safety committee, and we had the traffic safety committee in one evening. Brad Van Brunt was here, and we discussed about how these committees could work together or jointly. So what I had in your materials was just the background, which I guess this was from last fall, where I was looking at making some changes to the traffic safety bylaw that would change the voting members on that committee, and also align the appointment process with this appointment process, opposed to the bylaw that says town meeting appointments, which hasn't ever been followed as far as I know. So you don't need to act on that, but that's just because we were talking about the Public Safety Committee and traffic safety. I wanted to bring that up again for consideration, maybe for in the fall. So establishing the Public Safety Committee, the charge that we had, or I had proposed before, said to establish a public safety committee consisting of the town administrator, police chief, fire chief, CM&D director, and building inspector for the purpose of enhancing public safety on a town-wide basis, and to act as a resource for reviewing and implementing initiatives voted by the traffic safety committee, or similar language that we could come up with. And I believe at one point somebody mentioned that Board of Health should be included in the public safety committee.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
The problem I have with the language is I wouldn't want to limit the committee to just being a resource for reviewing and implementing initiatives voted by the Traffic Safety Committee. I would see traffic safety as a narrower committee focusing on traffic issues. But the Public Safety Committee would be broader and would deal with issues such as what we just talked about earlier today, the safety of children, the Pine Hill School.
I think he gets at that with the first clause, Paul, and then the second clause is just the adjunct resource to the Traffic Safety Committee. But the broader charge I see is the purpose of enhancing public safety on a townwide basis, and maybe that could be clearer so that it doesn't get mistaken for just a super Traffic Safety Committee, but...
It smacks of being an appeal body.
Right.
So the traffic safety decides they're going to, I don't know, ban traffic in the town, and somebody's unhappy with that, so then they, appeal to the Public Safety Committee and say, please overturn the decision of the Traffic Safety Committee because, or whatever their reasons are.
So we should work on the charge maybe a little.
Yeah, I think we were hoping that this body would have some sort of, if something came out of traffic safety, that it would go to this committee and be looked at how that's implemented and affects other aspects, rather than just the narrow traffic. But
Yeah, I think one of the questions fundamentally is whether traffic safety reports to them or not, or any of these other ancillary safety committees that have in the past or still exist. That's one thing, and if we decide that we like the reporting structure that it comes to us, so now we have another committee, that we don't put the public safety in the middle of traffic safety.
Right.
So that's something I think we should decide. I'm comfortable either way. I think more comfortable with the idea of this public safety, who is made up of the town subject matter experts really weighing in on things like whatever traffic safety might suggest, because I have no expertise,
right.
and therefore could make a decision that might not be the best one for the town.
Well,
And we all sat up here saying how important safety was when Chief Thompson was up talking about what happened yesterday. So I just throw that out there. I listen to Paul, and you probably see more of this type of thing at different communities.
Well, yeah, most towns have a traffic committee of some kind, but it's because ultimately the Board of Selectmen have to vote all these things. If there's going to be traffic rules and order is amended in some way, the Board of Selectmen has to do it. So rather than the Board of Selectmen doing all the work and having all the public input, you create a committee to do that and come back with a recommendation. The Traffic Safety Committee is supposed to report to the Board of Selectmen. One of my problems with this Public Safety Committee is that I don't want to interfere with the reporting, direct reporting by traffic safety. And I hear what you say, that the subject matter experts are important and should be consulted. But at the end of the day, the laws say we make the decisions, and we make the decisions because we represent the people, and we have to get the public input in a broader sense than just neighbors on a street campaigning for improvements to their street. I wouldn't want to eliminate that, and as part of that process, it's worked well in the past because, in fact, we consult with all of these officials. So I would see traffic safety reporting to the Board of Selectmen. It should be left alone. And the Public Safety Committee, if we're going to have one, should be a Public Safety Committee and not really involved with traffic. That's why I made the point before, which is I see these as separate, unrelated committees.
Well, I get almost all of what you're saying and think it all makes good sense, except from where I sit as a neophyte here, is I like the idea, so I like this second clause of the charge. I like the idea of the opportunity to say to the public safety guys, where do you weigh in on whatever traffic safety you're suggesting here? It's nice to have that ability to have folks looking at it from their perspective, subject matter experts, and I think that will help traffic safety be even more effective. As far as reporting, yeah, I think what you said all makes good sense, and I'm sold on that. I just do like the idea of being able to say, did you guys look at this? And if you have, what do you think about it? It may not change the decision, but I think it would be very helpful from where I sit.
What if there was I'm throwing this out there, and I'm not sure it works, but what if the chair of the Traffic Safety Committee was another member of this Public Safety Committee? And, in that way was
Yeah,
incorporated into that process?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea.
Maybe chair or
Or
designate.
designate, yeah,
Designate.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a thought on this as somebody on the Traffic Safety Committee?
Well, I have one question, they were read off kind of fast. You had the town administrator, the police chief, the fire chief, the C&D director, all suggested add of the Board of Health. Who was else?
Board of Health and Building Inspector.
The building inspector. Okay, thank you. Now my question is the fire chief, the police chief, the C&D director, and the town administrator are already involved with traffic safety, which also looks at not only the traffic in the roads, but also looks at pedestrian safety.
And one of David's other ideas was to extract those town officials from traffic safety, make traffic safety a citizens committee, and have those town officials sit on this public
Okay.
safety committee.
I think that's what was,
Well,
And that's a
so
bylaw
that-
change.
That explains
Yeah.
because.
That would
it
require a
seems-
bylaw change.
And that's fine, but sitting back here, it's sort of like you're duplicating a lot of the people on the.
And we're trying not to, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But certainly,
So if
I
the
would
chair of
say
the traffic
looking at
safety was on,
Public safety, you certainly, from a family of nurses and firefighters and EMT, you certainly need somebody from the Board of Health, if you're talking public safety, overall to be involved.
Sure.
Certainly.
You got a 15-member committee.
close to that, maybe 8, 9.
9's a good number, look at advisory.
I think I had added 2 residents on,
On that committee.
yeah. So that would be,
Can we say to act as a resource for the Board of Selectmen in reviewing and implementing initiatives voted by the Traffic Safety
I
Committee?
like that.
Yeah, sure.
I like that. That's a good compromise point.
And are we adding 2 citizens to this as well? Is that what you just said, David? Or one or more? Let's see, 1,
To the Public Safety Committee or the Traffic Committee?
4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 right now.
Traffic safety.
We have 7 right now without citizens.
We have 8 if you talk about traffic safety chair.
Did I count that right?
I had,
1, 2,
Right,
4,
I can't
5,
count.
6, 7.
I had 6 staff and 2 residents for a total of 8, and
On
then
which
we
committee?
asked for public safety.
Public safety.
And if we added the traffic
That makes it 9.
person, there'd be 9.
So 2 residents, that's not in here.
It doesn't say
that's
that on
key.
here on the proposed
Yeah,
chart.
so
so-
let's
No,
have
that-
it, yeah.
I have it in here for, under appointments for consideration.
Ah,
So it would say to establish a public safety committee consisting of the town administrator, police chief, fire chief, CM&D director, board of health, traffic safety, board of health member, traffic safety chair, and 2, and the building inspector, and 2 residents.
Now, do you want the traffic safety chair or the?
Traffic
Or
safety
designate.
designee. Yeah. Board of health designee, traffic safety designee.
There you go.
The Board of Health might designate a staff person or a health agent or...
I mean, I was
Oh.
naming the Board of Health Administrator, but you think it should be,
Yeah, I'd rather not have
Yeah,
that as part of the administrator's duties. Do you think?
Board of Health Designee.
I think so.
Right.
And it's a committee, and that person doesn't live in town.
Well, should it be Council on Aging Designee?
No, I don't know.
No? Okay, keep,
Council on Aging. Maybe Board of Health is different.
okay.
Yeah, that covers all the right bodies, and they're going to look out for the best interests of various segments of the community, including
Right.
And once we have a
Elders.
water system, we're going to need a water commissioner on that too.
And I like the idea of
Board of Health.
these groups being able to talk about the general public safety things that come up, month to month, but also to better scrutinize things before they go to town meeting, so that we know as soon as town meeting's done that there's a plan and we know what's
Yeah,
going on,
yeah.
rather than a separate group forming and bringing something through.
So, can you read back what the amended charge is right now? See whether, right, maybe we move forward.
To establish a public safety committee consisting of the town administrator, police chief, fire chief, CM&D director, building inspector, board of health designee, and the chair or designee from traffic safety, and 2 at-large residents for a total of 9 people, for the purpose of enhancing public safety on a town-wide basis, and to act as a resource for the Board of Selectmen
For reviewing and implementing initiatives.
for reviewing and implementing initiatives. But take out the voted by the traffic safety
Well, I would
committee.
say voted by the traffic safety, right, Paul?
But why
Well,
limit it to
let's
that?
eliminate.
Why not include, the Western Avenue committee?
Okay, fine,
Yeah, I
fine.
think
For
it's
just
too
reviewing and implementing safety initiatives.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, I think that's good.
Because that doesn't take away any of our statutory authority under traffic safety, and it creates a body that is going to be focused on safety issues and can bring to the Board of Selectmen those recommendations that are relevant to what the Board of
Right.
Selectmen is supposed to be doing.
Also, with the formation of this committee, we'll get some points back on the insurance. If we have a public safety committee that reviews like the loss runs for employees, that counts towards.
Great,
So we'll turn that in as well.
excellent.
So I would move to approve the creation of this traffic safety committee with the charge as just read.
Okay, but
Public safety? Public safety.
Public safety, sorry.
just a question about the order of the motions here, because what I heard before was that this is intertwined with making changes to the traffic safety committee. You're taking the same people out of that committee, so there wouldn't be duplicate committees. So shouldn't we first be talking about?
Well, I think we're on a lot of.
That's a bylaw change, and I don't think we have to do that to get to this.
I think we're all on a lot of duplicative, well, it's not duplicative committees. For example, the local emergency planning committee. I mean, you would think, well, that's public safety. Well, it's not really, because it's specifically focused on emergencies, not general public safety. where like traffic is focused on streets and sidewalks.
Yes, yeah, I guess, Paul, I'd like to see us move forward on this sooner than later, knowing that we might seek a bylaw change at the next town meeting to eliminate some of this duplication, but we'll have had some experience of the two committees acting in tandem, and we may find we don't want to make that bylaw change.
Yeah, I had proposed that the appointment would only be for a year, give a trial.
All right.
So we have a second on Peter's motion?
Second.
Further discussion, all in favor?
Good work, David.
Okay, so what you just approved is the charge.
To the
and-
public.
The creation of the committee and the charge.
Right, and the actual appointments you'll do at your next meeting.
Sure.
Yep.
Well,
But by
there's,
implication, when we say it consists of the town administrator and the police chief,
Those are the appointments?
it's not going to hard
Yeah.
for you to come forward with a list that doesn't have the town administrator on it.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
just the two.
I mean, usually we have the names instead of.
Oh, yeah, we'll ask, you'll ask Brad and you'll ask Board of
Yeah.
Health who their designees would be.
Yeah.
Good. Wow, that's
And
great.
and we were going to talk, I think, a little bit also about these, the sunsetting concept without making any decisions tonight, but just you have a footnote here on your handout that pertained to some committees, and I read that and realized that we had seen at least one of these committees, Wildlife Management, probably 9 months ago or something, and it was October, so, and the thought then was they were very close to coming in with some recommendations, and we haven't seen them again, and I guess the question is that a committee that continues? Does this wildlife committee go within public safety, or is it, two different animals, but so to speak? And how can we get, so how can we get something out of this wildlife committee if they're really going to do something?
I haven't, I'm not aware of them continuing to meet or putting forward any work product other than the last time that we proposed sunsetting them.
But we also had
Maybe a year
discussed,
extension.
I don't think we were talking about sunsetting, I think we had discussed configuring them more as an advisory, in an advisory capacity to you. And that way you could lead the charge using that group, just like we have done with the group that was dealing with the cost of
Campus.
property here, the campus
Yeah.
extension committee.
Yeah, and their
Well-
charge included some things like deer, using
Oh,
public lands for deer hunting
Well,
and
that was one of the things initiatives they were
nuisance
looking at.
animals and
Yeah.
things like that.
Now, if you want to, you could repurpose them as well. Instead of making them advisory, you could make them, basically the experts for where people go with the beaver issues or complaints about wildlife, to
Problem is, I'm
have
not
them
sure that
heard
They
and
have the
referred.
expertise to do that. That wasn't who was on that committee, I don't think, was it?
The animal control officer, I believe, was on there, right?
Do we-
And
do we-
conservation,
Do we pay for the animal control officer's time on this committee?
I can't remember if I determined that, I believe so.
Well, the conservation agent was on that committee, she was the co-chair
Yeah.
on that. Then you had the animal control officer, Joe Shepherd, you had, Dave Kaplan was on it as a resident, Scott Bernard was on it, Daniel Tyler was on it, Dave Clean was on it.
Yeah.
That was town forest.
Yeah, and I'd rather not have a committee that involves compensated town employees if it's not going to get anything done.
Right,
So
right,
that to me doesn't make any sense at all.
right.
But the other part of why I like the idea of having them advise the town administrator is
Yeah.
because you're involved in all these other aspects of things that they're working on, or they may have been working on, and might still be working on,
Right.
but they're working independently on those in many respects. And advising you allows or ensures that the left hand does know what the right hand's doing in different things,
Well,
whether it's beavers or...
Paul knows what they're opposed to.
Well, I think my confusion last year when I was looking
And we're
at
not
this.
chasing our tails. Sorry.
My confusion last year was what they were tasked with
Yes.
originally. And, I thought wildlife management was, all encompassing, but it turned out that they were basically tasked to return a hunt, hunting
That's not what they were
policy.
tasked, that's what they interpreted their task was. That's,
Oh,
so I think they
Well,
were
so I'm
tasked
still
with the
confused.
broader wildlife management plan, if you look at the charge. Because
okay.
we were pretty clear on that. But their initial focus was on test, or having some kind of bow hunting on town forest.
That's right. At the time, I was working with an intern on trying to pull together a wildlife management
Yeah,
plan
yeah.
and working with the conservation agent, not realizing that they had been, they
Well, we
used
talked to them
their
about going to Dover and looking at Dover's plan for hunting on
Hunting.
public land, and
west
we just
end.
haven't seen anything back from them, but it would be good to get that initiative going in some way. And the other thing is, when I was at the Council on Aging breakfast a week and a half ago, all you have to do is bring up the word nuisance beavers, and you can have 45 minutes or an hour worth of steady conversation about all the problems that are in town. We've got to do something to at least have a policy and an approach that works for people and that addresses these issues in a way that's not, it just doesn't get everybody all bogged up in cost and delay and problems for their properties. So
Right.
whether it comes out of a committee, I know I've suggested to you, David, there are towns that have bylaws that establish town policy and direct committees to handle these issues in certain ways. There may be other approaches, but we've got to do something, I think, as a town to have at least a policy in a systematic and consistent way of dealing with these things so people don't get frustrated.
Right. I think about 6 months ago, we did pull everyone together, including the animal control officer, Board of Health, and myself, and we sat down and looked at where people were getting the stumbling blocks, and we ironed out who is the first contact. And basically, people would call the Board of Health, and it would end up at the animal control officer to determine if it's a beaver issue or not. And then they would work with the Board of Health agent to determine if it's something that they should be, I guess, trapping or putting something else in. I can't think of it off my head, but it is cumbersome. And if
Right,
you
and
look at the
if the
state,
water's rising and it's taking you weeks after weeks to
For
do
permitting.
each step, and each step and each step, that's not a
right,
constructive way to deal with folks who are taxpayers and own property in town.
and we kind of leave them out.
System's gone.
Yeah.
We kind of leave them out to hire their own trappers, and it gets to be a cumbersome process. And if you go on the state website and look at their flow chart on how it's supposed to be handled, it looks like a Normandy map. It's just arrows all over the place.
Part of the problem is state law, and it's beyond our ability to fix. You just have to get these different permits. You have to get a wetlands permit.
Sure.
You just can't say, that's a cumbersome thing, so let's not have one. But what the Concom could do perhaps is do what's known as a formula permit, which is a blanket permit that has the conditions already voted,
If it meets these conditions, then,
and you're automatically permitted.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it is fair to say, David, that we follow the state processes and rules for the burden of liability and cost and so forth. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yes.
Absent, that's our fallback position. What we do is consistent and conforms to the state law. And also the state law is specific about who's got the obligation of the beaver and the damage and so forth.
Yeah, and the issues I was hearing, Peter, were less, and you may be more familiar, but less about whose obligation it was, although I think there was some of that, but more about
Lack of action.
when somebody, when Peter Caruso's told, well, it's your issue, Peter, and then you have to work through the town process to figure out what you need to do, go step by step, and sometimes there's big time gaps between the steps, and people get
Damage is
frustrated
done.
and concerned about that.
Well, I agree with the notion that government exists to help people and not to tie them up with red tape. And so we, as a government, should be expediting things and making things easier for our residents. We know what the state law is, but there are ways that we can comply with state law, but set it up like I was saying, a blanket formula permit already issued, having people trained, and a lot of it is simple responsiveness. If someone calls with a beaver problem, instead of saying, "Oh no, not another beaver problem," we should be trained to hop to it.
Step into action, yeah.
That's a
and get
rabbit
it done.
problem. Up to it is the rabbit problem.
Well, that's next.
Rabbit, woodchuck, deer.
Slap to it, yeah. But no, great point. Sorry to interrupt, but that's a great point. Elliot, you had some input on the beaver issue.
Yeah, you mentioned beaver,
We've heard you before on the beavers.
well, everyone knows that Elliott Taylor wants every beaver exterminated.
Yes, we do.
Gone. But beside that, I was going to say, when you started talking about them, that the Board of Health has state laws that they can follow. And that was before you started mentioning Board of Health with the beavers. So again, I'll say every beaver should be shot on sight. And it doesn't matter what day of the year it is or anything else.
But unfortunately, state law provides otherwise.
I know.
And we have to comply with
We
state
have a
law.
lot of damn fool state laws, and you know it.
But that's up to the great and general court to resolve.
We'll let the great and general court come out here and get rid of the beavers. Or pay for it.
All right, so we have kind of a mission here on wildlife for, not really?
No, no, the best I can do is, we sent out the notices for people to seek reappointment a month ago, so we haven't received from anyone from that committee.
I'd rather reconfigure them from a committee appointed by us, reporting to us, is like we did with the, I think it was the Communications Committee.
Right.
They still exist, they're still doing what they do, only they're doing it for you. And in this group, the wildlife group, again, I think it's important that all of the paws are talking, as Mike says.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I would prefer to see them under your wing as opposed to under ours.
Excellent, that's quite a tale.
Well, we might be barking up the wrong tree.
That's a damn good idea.
If we're going to make a change to the committee, before we change any committees, I would strongly urge us to consult with the committee.
This is how we got here, though, Paul. This is what we did last October. We thought we were going to change it. We consulted with them, they came in,
And they were
they told us they were
very
going to do something, and nothing's happened.
But we don't know that nothing's happened.
Nothing is happening.
What?
We asked them.
We now know.
I think a relative of a committee member is here and says nothing has happened.
No, yes, a relative of, and more importantly, a resident that attended every one of those meetings. And the original committee, if I may, the original committee was called the Deer Management Committee. And then that one just never came to fruition. You were created, they never met. It disappeared, then, kind of like another committee, they got renamed as the Wildlife Management Committee. And that one encompassed, quote, whatever they wanted, whatever critters that they felt were an issue in town. There was a deer management plan that kind of came up, but you had a couple people that what they wanted to do, as Peter Caruso mentioned, deer hunt. There was an intern. The intern went out and was counting the tops of little trees to see how many tree saplings had been chewed on. That was the utilization of the intern as far as the deer management plan.
The
Well-
intern did more than that, so let's
Well,
not belittle what he did.
no, that's what was represented at the wildlife management meetings.
Right, okay.
And as far as the beaver issue, yes, Fish and Wildlife, the state has a wonderful flow chart.
Yeah.
Actually very easy to read. Yeah.
If you follow it
You'll be
through.
doing Normandy
Yeah.
and D-Day and all that, but you will conquer it.
Yeah.
You will conquer it. But that flow chart all of a sudden became this huge project that had to be switched and customized for Sherborn. No, it doesn't need to be customized for Sherborn. It's the state law.
Well, so here's the thing,
So-
rather than having the members of this wildlife management committee think we're snakes in the grass. There, I got another one.
Excellent.
That David contacts the chair of that committee, and asks just, the board of selectmen are thinking of just turning you into an advisory committee to the town administrator,
That's
unless you have
fine, but
major
I-
objections, and then we take action on that, and then your term, rather than go through and reappoint them or whatever it is we're gonna do.
But
At this
if I
stage.
could, I do want to make a sort of a general objection and general statement that town volunteers are a wonderful asset for this community. And I don't like participating by sitting here in anything that's negative about
I agree.
volunteers. And for people to say that volunteers aren't doing the job or that, whatever. These are volunteers. They are paid zero. They come forward because they care about issues. And they should be treated with great respect. And I don't want any volunteer who's come forward and may have done work or may not have done work, and have them wake up one day and tell them, we don't need you anymore, go away.
No, and that, I agree with you 100%, Paul, but what I'm suggesting is that for that committee to be more effective and add more value to the town, doing it through David is the place to do that.
But what I will do is I will contact the chair and say, do you have something you would like to present to the board because it's time for appointment renewal and we haven't heard from any members, or should we be looking at repurposing?
But
or
I
heading a
think you
different
should,
direction?
I would like to see you phrase it in part that, at least from my perspective, I think that they could be more effective by working more directly with you because you're also doing these other things. You're involved with these other groups, you know these other initiatives, you're interacting with the various departments within the town and so forth, so that, like we say, the paws are all talking to the paws. The left paw knows what the right paw's doing. It's that, and it's not to belittle any effort that they've put in so far, because I know that's a good group of folks that's on that committee.
But in essence, you're leaving it up to me to decide whether they should be pursuing deer hunting.
Well, I think that's right, because it seems to me you're, not from a policy standpoint, David, but you're more in touch with what the needs of the town are sort of holistically, and if you can draw on these residents who have expertise in that area and kind of guide them in a direction that's going to be most productive for solving problems that we really have, that'd be good. I mean, I would suggest deer hunting may be a problem we really have. We certainly have too many deers. Many of them live in my yard. And we could, maybe have a policy for hunting deer that would help the tick problem in town. I mean, who knows?
For the deers who are partying in my yard, I'll send them to yours.
Excellent. So
An invitation in there.
And Paul, I don't disagree with you in terms of volunteers, but with this committee, it isn't all volunteers. I mean, one of the points I made before was there are paid employees on this committee. So to the extent this committee is working and we're not getting anything out of the committee, it is a waste of town resources. It doesn't belittle the contribution that the volunteers are making, and it doesn't really say anything about the paid employees either. It just says we ought to be applying our resources in a more effective way.
It was an odd arrangement. There were two town employees. One was paid, one was not paid.
Okay.
But I do think we do need a deer management program. We've talked about it for more than 10 years on this board. We have too many deer in town. We've been advised from various state agencies, I could list them. The herd needs to be culled. It's not healthy for the herds. There's a connection to Lyme's disease from ticks that are on the deer. There's a whole variety of reasons that I've heard from doctors to law enforcement, all kinds of reasons why there should be a deer management program. And it's been an awful long time that we've been talking about it. I don't want to see this committee now suddenly become a beaver management committee. That really isn't what this committee was.
But they're,
But if they've been talking about it for 10 years, maybe it's time for them to move on to a different subject that
It's not
they
they
want to
who-
deal with.
It's not they who've been talking about it, it's
So
been
who's
this
talking about
board.
it? Okay.
Right, but Paul, we created, because I was involved with the creation of that committee and its charge, and it was broader. I know that initially there was a deer management effort, but we broadened the scope of that. That's what was created. That's the committee, and that's what it was supposed to have done. It did come forward with trying to get, at the 11th hour, trying to get, bow hunting on town within weeks of when the season would otherwise start, and it just wasn't time enough to do that. I would also say that even though I've lost all my rhododendrons,
So have I.
you could find just as many studies that say otherwise to anything that you would say why you want to cull the herd. So, and the Lyme disease problem. So,
Right.
so you're likely to hear me take the side of Bambi when it comes to discussing what we do with the deer.
But that
Just so
may
you
be,
know,
but
and that's fine.
the last report was that there was a draft of a management plan. It was prepared, and they were going to circulate it to other committees, particularly the Town Forest Committee and the
Conservation.
Yes,
Commission.
because they controlled the property, right? Yeah.
And it may well be that it encountered resistance from one of the committees and therefore ran into a roadblock. But instead of coming back to us and saying, hey, we need help because we have a problem, it may have led to people being discouraged and not.
Do you think they can be any less effective in an advisory capacity to David? Under the paw versus paw
Well,
approach?
my concern here is that David's interests are dealing with the issues that are before him, like, what do I do with beavers? And that's really not what, that's an important, deal with beavers, because as I've already said, I support that. But we need specifically need a deer management program. We also need a coyote management program of some kind. What do people do about coyotes? So that's why we went along with the change.
That could help with the deer management program a lot.
The
Yeah.
coyotes, there's a very complicated relationship between coyotes.
But just here, let me give you the example. David had this intern whose thesis or whatever he was working on dealt with deer management.
He did
I
a
believe.
survey, he did night
So
cameras.
he did a lot of work. And unless there was, some coordination of the two efforts, which I don't think there was much,
Yeah.
they're off, the committee's off doing one thing, and we had this resource doing another. And so what I'm looking for is to be sure that to the extent there's another intern doing some other study, whether it's beavers, coyote, deer, hornets.
Well, originally, the intern was working with the conservation agent who was also on the wildlife
Yeah,
committee.
yeah, yeah.
So that was the link of whatever he was doing was supposedly getting back to the committee, but the intern continued, and I don't think anything fed back to the committee. And I do have his results now as survey results from the town, and he offered to come back in and present those.
That'd be great.
Why don't we do that? Do you think?
That would be great to hear
that's-
that.
And invite in the wildlife committee to hear that. And now we've got them in and we can ask them what they want to do.
There you go.
Next year, the black bears come in.
On deer management, the buck stops here with the selectmen. That's what I said.
Oh, God.
Does anybody ever call you dear?
All right, are we up to the next item yet?
So I'll invite Zach in to present findings on a coordinated night with the wildlife.
Be good.
And I
Yeah.
think that's good, because it's gonna be good for the young man who gave us a lot of free time. Right? He was a good guy, I liked him.
I forgot about that survey. He did take a survey in.
Yeah, that's right.
I stuffed the ballot box. I filled out about 5 forms.
He accounted for that statistically.
Did he really?
or something.
Yeah, okay, all right.
No, it's pretty elaborate.
All right, so what do we, staff and committee appointments? We've got,
Well, I figured that was going to be a more in-depth, longer discussion as well. I don't know if you want to take the next one out of order.
yeah, since Roger's here,
Since
that'd be great.
Roger's here.
Good. So David, you want to give us some background on this? I know
Yeah.
you've got the most
Wanna
background.
come up, Roger?
Roger and David can give us background.
Yeah, basically, we formed the town center water options committee, to look at the options for updating the study that was done in 2007. And the committee's met a couple of times, and they're starting to pull together data and whatever else we have. And then it came up that there's a deadline for a grant application on August 15th, and we met with Representative Linsky about applying for planning monies for this grant. And
And Representative Linsky encouraged us to take quick action so we would get on the
he's trying to
radar screen
encourage
for this committee.
that we
And this
obtain
grant.
professional assistance to get on it, to make sure that we have something submitted this year. So I met Monday with a consultant that I know of that has worked in Framingham and Natick, and I think Roger was familiar with, or knows who they were, at least.
She's been doing the general chemical work for the town of Framingham.
Okay.
So we met with them on a Monday, and Carol Boyes, his husband, is the conservation agent, the retired conservation agent from Natick, who's also worked on these grants with the Natick Public Works. And he happens to know the deputy director where these applications actually get filed. So he met with us and he called him, and we had a conference call with him. The guy seemed very enthusiastic about us submitting an application. He pretty much said any money that we put into planning goes towards the betterment of the project and would get approved. But I was looking to get some money approved to pay out of our consulting line at first to try to help pull this together and meet with engineering firms. And I haven't met with Roger after that meeting to discuss it any further, so this is what would be good.
And my concern is we don't really know how much money we should ask for. You know, there's got to be some kind of limit. It'd be nice if we had somebody that's done these things before. So we're screwing around, and everybody in the committee's trying to think of friends and acquaintances and whatnot to get that done. But it's something like $10,000 or less, probably on the less side.
Oh, you think?
Yeah, to pull us together.
$10,000
What is it we're applying for?
Planning money for
Planning money?
water and wastewater.
So there was
Almost guaranteed.
this study effort that we're undertaking to see whether we can come forth with a proposal for a water or a wastewater system in the center of town is going to involve a larger planning effort.
Right.
And this is state grant money that would get professional assistance for that planning effort, as I understand.
So when I went back and looked at the charge, it does meet the charge because we're expected to bring some sort of feasible options back to the town meeting in the spring. So we have to be working with some sort of engineering firm to be pulling
All right.
something together. So that's what we would be requesting approval.
Okay, because when
Grant
I stopped in and saw David this morning, and I maybe we were confused, but
No, I was.
okay, so we aren't applying for a $4.5 million loan from the state to
Not yet.
put sewer and water.
I thought because of the application that we would have to submit both sides, one being the planning being more focused and the other being conceptual,
Okay,
but it's not.
so
We
we're
just-
looking to engage a consultant out of our budget of consulting budget. Is that what you're looking to do here tonight?
Yes, so
To fill out the grant application to get planning funds to see what the possibilities
Right.
are? Is that a,
if you look under number 2 on what I had written up here is,
okay, that's a lot of words to read here.
yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get this before the meeting, so I'm
No,
Give me
this
the
is all-
Cliff Notes
no
version?
discourtesy is intended to
Right.
my fellow board members, but I'm reading this here, and the first point was that we should not take action on an agenda item. And the second is that on this agenda item, the request is for $3,000 from the Selectmen's consulting line item. How much money do we have in the Selectmen's consulting line item? Is this last year's?
No,
or
this would be for
future?
FY15. Yeah, so I think the budget line is 4,500 or something. It's not a lot of money.
So this would use most of that money.
And then it would be put into it would be part of the planning expense and hopefully be reimbursed if the planning grant goes through.
I mean, I have to say Representative Linsky was very encouraging on this and, also made a very clear point that unless we have a professionally prepared or compiled application, we're not likely to be approved, that we need to have somebody pull this together in time so we have a full compliant package that goes into the state. So we can't really count on being able to do that on our own.
How much is the planning grant that we're seeking?
I'm
We're
guessing,
not sure yet. That's why I need an expert to find out how much.
I'm guessing,
But it would be tens of thousands of dollars.
yeah, I'm guessing
Well, that's what
$25,000.
To verify that we're not going to spend $3,000 to get a $1,000
No,
grant.
it's more like $25,000 to $50,000.
No.
It's been done before.
No, this was approval, what I was looking for is approval in a not-to-exceed amount of $3,000. If you approve 500, that's what I'm going to use, but I'm recommending that we use Boyes Consulting as sort of a project manager to go out and line up those engineers to come in, present what they have, what they're offering us, and to help us work out the agreement that they're not going to get paid for the work that they do on submitting this application, that they would only get paid under successful completion of that application, and then it's a guarantee that they would be
So it's not
the
completion, it's
designing
approval.
firm. Right,
Is there, right?
right,
Of funding.
right. So basically, and I talked to Carol today, she said that she believes that they would agree to something like
Yeah,
that.
most companies will.
So can you just help me, because I can't listen and read at the same time, sometimes I can't read, period. What, we want to spend $3,000 to have somebody fill out a grant application, and we're applying for a grant to get somebody to do engineering work to do what? I want you to just
Not
clarify
quite.
for me what we're doing here.
The $3,000 was to cover any sort of consulting costs that the consultant has to do in trying to pull information together or assist the engineers in pulling the application together. The engineering firms, they would help us select the engineering firm by bringing different ones in. And then when we select that engineering firm, they would be doing the grant application, not the consulting firm.
All right, and the application is to do what, is what I'm really
The
trying to get.
application goes to the state, and it requests planning dollars of $25,000 or whatever the engineering
From the
firm
Clean
believes
Water
they
State
can.
Revolving Fund.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And help me understand what we're gonna plan, because here's what I'm getting at. Down at the bottom, the one sentence I read before our action item, the firm would begin, if the grant's approved, the firm would begin the planning and design work on options to be brought to the 2015 annual town meeting for consideration. So just talk through that a little bit if we can, because the reason I say that is, in the past, I've seen where we've hired engineering firms, we said, we want you to come forth with options, and they come forth with solutions, a solution generally, and I'm just, I want to be sure we do identify options.
Hopefully, the Waterworks Committee will have options to consider that will get narrowed down to a couple,
Yeah,
maybe a couple of wastewater systems and probably only one water system as a possibility. The planning people would take that and say, okay, what's that really going to cost? Timelines, finances, all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Once we've said, we want you to look at these three different things and tell us what it's going to cost. It was interesting that apparently this planning money is easy to get, and it doesn't have to, the plan doesn't have to be rigidly tied to the rules that go with this particular thing. You can plan a whole new subdivision water system on this kind of thing. It doesn't have to be tied to what sounds like mostly safety issues of existing systems or trying to recover a difficult area, that kind of thing. That's what the current water grants are for. Same, what we want, actually. But it can be a very broad thing, but we would try to restrict these planning process to things that people have agreed to in town.
And there may be more than one water option, because
Yeah,
there may be a couple of routes, or there may be a district that's one size, or a district that's
Understood,
another
yeah.
size, and you know, they could provide us
And this
with...
committee is
assistance on
part
that.
of this whole process, and
Yeah,
that really
but
came
like,
up
Paul,
clear.
you know, to follow Paul's point before, this is a committee of volunteers who all have other jobs or other interests, and between now and August 15th, this committee is not going to be able to pull together a winning
Okay, I get that.
application for
Yeah.
funding.
Okay, and thank you, Roger, that helps. I think that gives a lot of comfort, more comfort. Let's just talk about our consulting budget. How have we used the consulting budget in the past? And I think it's been $8,000 in the past, and we're always using it on,
I think the
Last
consultant
minute
budget is
stuff.
never, it's just a amount budgeted, and that it's, you, Board of Selectmen incurs expenses through the year to use consultants in different ways. For example, the appraisal. When we did the budget for this year,
Yes.
we didn't have that budgeted, but it was something
out of
that
that
came up.
consulting budget.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But actually, consultant line was already,
We cut
sure
that down.
what we had used it for already, but I believe the appraisal person, we were going to, I was trying to pay out of legal,
Oh, yeah.
because, justifying it that the land swap was a
Yeah.
legal expense.
But I guess the point I'm trying to get at is there's nothing that really jumps out as we use consulting for particular purposes in a typical year. So that where I'm trying to get to is, because we're using what it sounds like 2/3 of our consulting budget for next year, this to me sounds like a pretty darn good thing to be using it for.
Yeah, and the thing is we can, I'm banking on getting the money back.
Understood, yeah.
As this
Yeah.
expense being
Good.
part of the planning expense. The only way we wouldn't get the money back is if the application was turned down, then we wouldn't be able to submit this as a reimbursable expense.
Right.
The bigger cost is the engineering firm's time of pulling data together or collecting any data and doing that application. And you'd be talking, I'm thinking if we had to pay somebody to do it, it'd be 10 or 15 grand, but by doing this arrangement, we won't have to front that money up front. I think when
And
you
we're
and
going
I
to get a lot
talked-
of good information out of it regardless.
Right, so you and I talked earlier that we were concerned about under what authorization could we be paying them to do that work.
Right.
And this afternoon, I spoke with Carol Boyes and said that we could work the arrangement, and most likely any of those big consulting firms would take care of this at no cost if they were going to be guaranteed the work
I see.
upon successful completion of
Right.
the application.
And you have a few big consulting firms in mind. You don't have to say who they are, but you've
Yeah,
You've vetted a few
number of
with-
names.
Yeah.
Roger and some others.
4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, so basically what I was looking for was guidance on an acceptable amount, and that money is already in the budget, it's already budgeted for a purpose. And basically, if it's 500, 1,000, 1,500, 3,000, whatever it is, the Boys is willing to help us on whatever it is, they'll just
And
scale
you
the
said this
work
could
to
be
whatever
baked
they
into
can.
the grant application as well. So if it's $3,000, we would add $3,000 to the grant.
I'm banking on it coming back
Yeah.
to us after the approval of the grant. And then I have to work with the town accountant on restoring it back into that line.
Yes. Yeah, that's a different battle, isn't it?
Yeah. But-
The test well we put in was done with a small amount of money up to SEA company that did the engineering work for us to get the test done and that kind of stuff. And that came out of the same budget a number of years ago.
So I think we were contacting the person who
Yeah.
originally did that study,
Yeah.
but they're not with the same firm.
Right.
So that's one of the people. So
Do we have a?
I was looking for,
on this, or-
some, like a clear green light to go forward with a dollar amount, and also,
No, I think
Who-
the
who do
way
you
you
want to-
worded this is.
who do you want to make that decision, the
And our
determination
options
of
are
the
you,
engineer?
Right?
Well, it could be me, it could be the water commissioners, it could be the committee, but if we go with the committee, then I think it's going to slow down coordinating
It's
the
gotta be
engineers with
quick.
the committee.
It's
Yeah.
got to be quick.
So I know Roger's availability
What would you recommend, David?
lately has
Roger?
been
Pretty good.
workable.
I'm coming. We have a committee meeting Monday night, by the way. So.
Okay.
Yeah, but I still don't think we should leave this to a committee vote. I would suggest if you're comfortable doing it or doing it with Roger's advice, that's
Yeah, so I'll consult with Roger. I can do it as the chief procurement officer. I can
Yep.
Yeah.
take care of
You
the,
okay with that? Paul, you okay with that?
Yeah, just longer term. This is becoming entirely a public undertaking. But to some extent, it's intended to help a defined population. And at some point, it might be useful to have some contribution from that defined group, rather than all being at the taxpayer's expense.
Well, we probably can't pull that together and to take advantage of the opportunity of
Oh, yeah, no.
seeking a grant here, but
Well, they could, I mean, you could have a business group put up the money.
well, so couldn't we ask the group,
Sherborn Business Association.
Sherborn Business Association, to file a grant simultaneous with this? Should, you know, the grant being subject to whether the state comes forth or not, but, you know, maybe they'd be willing to front some or all of this amount.
It's just the assumption that it's entirely the taxpayer's problem.
That's a good point.
And there is a lot of reasoning why it should be a benefit to all the taxpayers in the town to have a vibrant downtown area. I certainly support it, and I don't live in the downtown area, and I'm willing to pay some of my taxes that way. But it will directly benefit a group of people who it'll make their life a lot easier.
well,
And so, to some extent, it would be nice to have a public-private partnership on this rather than going alone on it.
That's why it's so great, you know, going back to your theme about volunteers, it's so great we have people from the business community who are on this committee, not even town residents, but people who have land and businesses
I'm
in
talking about
town.
money.
But these are people who do a lot, they do a lot for the town too. I mean, I think the town is going to benefit from this. As you pointed out, it's a benefit to the individuals who own property in that area of town, but it's also a benefit to the tax base. It's a benefit to the Pine Hill School, the town offices.
Woodhaven, all the town
Woodhaven, the library, and, you know, anything that would be conceivably within a water district, and much of that is town or in some sense public.
and if it allowed for any further development of any of those properties, it should come back in taxes that everyone would benefit from.
Well, I'm not questioning the
Yeah.
public involvement. I'm questioning that it's exclusively public involvement.
Well, they are involved in the committee. If you want them to pony up money, I could easily ask them, and I think they would come up with something.
Well, it wouldn't hurt to ask, but, you know, ultimately, who's going to pay for this system? A lot of the costs are going to be the user costs anyway, so in the end, they're going to pay. I mean, to me, it's not a lot different, Paul, than when, you know, the East Goulding Street Bridge was fixed at taxpayer expense, and probably half the town never drives on East Goulding Street because they live on a different direction, but we all share in that cost because it's to the benefit of the town as a whole, so. Goulding Street East, excuse me.
Does the business association pay for the flags along the town center?
I don't know, that's-
I don't know.
Oh, the veterans paid for that. So they paid for the holiday flags that were
Well,
up
can we
and
have
down.
a motion to support the $3,000 request with the understanding that David would make a decision, but that he'd also try to get support from the business community to defray or refund that $3,000?
If we can get the money back from the grant, it would be fine. If the grant's denied and we're out of pocket $3,000, it might be nice to see if we have some sort of stop loss there. And
I'm sure they
That's a
would
good way of
pledge.
doing that.
they
Yeah.
pick up like half of any loss or something.
I think we
Good way
could
of doing it.
pledge that. And, you know, like I said, the dollar amount is,
Yeah,
it just
not
a-
to exceed, you have a limit.
yeah, I put not to exceed 3,000. It just, you can put any amount in there. It just, I might be back sooner to
Look for
ask
more.
for, yeah, exactly, for a different amount.
Yeah, so I move that.
Okay, so-
Rather, you want me to read this?
No, but motion to authorize David to
Yeah. So moved.
expend up to $3,000 from the consulting budget and direction to have David request a stop-loss contribution from the business community if they're willing to do so. Lynn? Okay, so we have somebody to second it?
Second.
Second. Further discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Excellent.
All right, good, great. Thanks, Roger.
Good job, Roger, nice shirt.
What's the shirt?
You got me off my boat.
Okay.
Hanging in the bilge.
Thanks,
you,
see you.
Roger.
Okay, and what do we have next here, David? We've got, I think you and I talked, we're not going to do any appointments today, but maybe we'll go through these appointments for the next meeting.
Right, basically you could edit the list of appointments that I put in that packet. Secretary of State's office requires listing of what offices you're appointing to. And this week, I didn't have the list prepared at the time that we posted the warrant. So I have the proposed appointments in this packet that I just gave you. And I could read the list as it's presented, and then we could vote it at the next meeting. And I would just attach this to the next agenda. But these are all uncontested seats.
Okay, so there's two pages, then one of them has, it says Board of Selectmen 2014 appointments to be made as of June 19th. That's just a status report?
That is a status report of the available seats,
Okay.
and it just shows which seats are vacant and which ones are unknown status.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
It looks like we've got a couple of committees have completely vacant seats, or does that just mean that? like,
No,
for
there is
example,
the...
Historic District Commission has 5 vacant seats. Is there anybody on our Historic District Commission? One person on that committee. So if any property owner in the district needs an approval, it's a one-person board?
I think we've been hammering for a year or more that
So one thing to
people-
think about longer term, and I mean, I'm very much in favor of the historic district and historic protection, but if we can't field a team to show up to hear applications, we're putting property owners at, considerable risk and expense to either not be able to get an approval that they need to do their work, or to have to deal with, just an uncertain process. And we ought to think about, whether we go to town meeting and either amend the bylaw or repeal the bylaw because we don't have enough interest as a town in taking care of our historic district.
Well, we're the appointing authority, and if the committee doesn't have any members, then probably
comes back to the
comes back
selectmen.
to the Board of Selectmen as our
And so we would sit
responsibility.
as a historic district commission, which is, I guess, fine if we want to do that, but you would think folks who live in that district would step forward and say, okay, I'll be on that committee, if it's of interest.
I'm not aware of a year and a half of one name coming forward.
It's been fairly vacant the whole time, right?
I mean, and this has gone on for years. I remember years ago, it was George Fisk and one other person, I think, and maybe it was Carol still, I don't know.
So just looking at that same sheet, there were approximately 35 vacant seats across the board of all those committees.
Mhm.
And we still are trying to seek the status of 42 other seats on whether they are requesting reappointment or not.
Okay.
So conceivably, you could have 77?
Worst case scenario.
Well, plus the 2 new selectmen seats, so it's really 79.
There you
And maybe it's people, end of school year and stuff, and they're just not thinking, but we've sent out 2 notices, and we'll continue to stay after them. And I think last year these dragged on till the end of summer or longer on some of the committees.
Right.
Already Conservation is asking to hold until July to allow them to review names and put forward their recommendation.
Yeah, and that's a subject probably for a longer discussion, I would think.
Yeah. Well, I haven't, and I told them to send me something in writing, which I haven't received yet. But as soon as I do, I'll pass it on to you, and then you can consider the request.
One committee has nothing, there's no comment under it. That's the sixth committee up from the bottom.
Which one?
Revenue development.
Sixth committee up from the bottom. Is that an unknown status?
I can't remember why I left it blank.
I know one member's not seeking reappointment.
We haven't received any, I would consider those all unknown status, but all three aren't up for reappointment.
We had one person.
So how do we go communicate with these different folks?
On revenue development?
How are we trying to reach out to these different folks? Are you emailing them,
Well, we
calling them?
emailed them, but now the next thing is to do is pick up the phone and start calling them.
I see.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to do.
Right.
Phone calls.
Right. And you know, the other thing is particularly with some of these committees that have a public face where they're hearing applications or they're, meeting in sessions that are more than just advisory, we really need to think about the public interaction and sort of the service orientation of some of these committees and not make it a regrettable thing or an offensive thing for people to appear before a board. I've heard too many people
Right.
in town who say it's too difficult to go before boards in Sherborn, that they're treated poorly, that they're not treated like a citizen of the town or someone who's a peer or tax-paying member of the town. Not that they want special treatment, but they just want to be treated respectfully. And I
Yeah.
guess, I'd be interested in knowing before we reappointed people who were on boards that were in that position, that they understood that and intended to have a face that was respectful to the folks who were going to come in front of them.
Every citizen in this town should be treated with respect.
Tell me about
Even Elliot Taylor should be treated with respect.
Especially,
So in the past, we've,
it. Put it in
Including the
writing.
Board of Selectmen.
no, you went too far there, Peter.
We've been asking for people to send us something back in writing. Maybe if we're doing phone calls and we just get a verbal from somebody requesting reappointment, and we don't have any other
Do we work
applicants
through
for
the
that.
chair of the current chair of the committee? Because that's really the
They're
focal
notified.
point.
They're
They are
also.
notified.
She is notified.
You may need to call them, though,
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
you may need to.
The chairs are notified to bring forward names that they would recommend.
Just a suggestion on the Energy Committee. I was at a meeting in the State House the other day. Someone asked me, towns are now in their fourth round of green energy grants. And apparently Sherborn only applied for the first round and has done nothing on any of the three subsequent rounds. And there's apparently a lot of money that follows. Once you become a green community, then there are all this money that follows. And so just like we were talking earlier about advisory committees to the town administrator, where there's a whole process that you have to be not an expert in energy, but you have to be an expert in dealing with the state and state bureaucracy and filing grants in order to keep the funding coming. Again, I was asked why hasn't Sherborn followed up on any of these funding grants, and I don't know the answer.
Have an answer.
Well,
Somebody was just trying to be friendly and say, why?
Heads up.
it's
Heads up.
it's total manpower. I mean, the Energy Committee's they've been putting in plenty of hours trying to do the projects that they already had approval for. There are procurement issues that we've dealt with, there's paperwork issues, and it's all been used, but it was a big effort just to spend what we did get.
Yeah, it was 135,000, but it's
Yeah.
like 3 years ago.
We're still spending it. The fire department HVAC is utilizing that money as well. And that project's,
Well, Paul's saying there's money out there, we ought not to be turning our back on that money. It doesn't mean that Energy Committee has to be the only ones involved, but somebody,
But
Right,
we could
but
get
I'm-
150 a year or something.
well, that's what- I'm agreeing with you, Paul.
right, but I think the energy committee is reluctant to go after more when they're already behind the eight ball trying to get spent what they have
Well, let me
on
ask
the
a
plate.
question, David. Does it have to be spent by the Energy Development Committee?
Yeah, one-
There are deadlines that when it has to be spent. We were,
No, but does this committee that we've set up, the Energy Committee to advise the town on energy issues, is that the only committee
No.
that can spend energy grant money? So
no.
maybe they need to delegate a little bit and we get somebody else involved in that process.
That's why I'm going with the Peter model,
Yeah.
the Caruso model, of a committee that reports to the town administrator, but essentially, the town administrator would be charged with developing the turning the spigot on to keep the flow of fresh money coming into the town. But a committee that works with him could be the ones that are actually working on projects. I mean, maybe the school has projects, maybe the library has projects, maybe town hall, town buildings might have
You're really
projects.
describing almost a full-time job, Paul. You're describing somebody who would be able to monitor available state monies and write grants
However,
for those monies. It's not that we can't do it, but it's going to take away from something else David is doing. So is there another way to do it?
I will be bringing you something related to that. For instance, we use a project manager on the fire department HVAC project. We're probably going to have to do that to help pull the library project together. We're using a project manager for this town options committee to meet deadlines, and it's relying on consultants is something that I'm not proud of, but we are getting better results from using these people to carry out town functions, and maybe that's something that where somebody has specific expertise and the project manager that's doing the fire department HVAC, is a licensed architect who's worked on these grants before and checks in on the project every day. It's going along smoothly. It doesn't take my time to go over there and check in, but maybe once a week with the chief to see how things are going. I'm just saying the investment in those kinds of people have a big return on payback and freeing up our time to do the other things. So.
Well, we also have a lot of volunteer hours, which, again, could be directed towards things that are going to be more productive for the town if that was appropriate to do. If there's a way to get, some other committee involved in applying for these grants or identifying grant opportunities, maybe that's a way to do it. We have all these really smart people who live in town who have volunteered for different committees, but sometimes the effort they're putting in, when you look at the return on a townwide basis, might be better spent doing something else that would conceivably be just as interesting to them and more productive for the town as a whole.
My plan is that we might have had $450,000 in rounds 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
And it's hard to believe that we don't have any projects. My sense from the last report we had was that a lot of the stuff we were doing was immediate, low-hanging fruit that would provide, quick and easy return. But as things get more sophisticated,
If it took 3 years, that's not quick and easy. If
Well,
it
I
took
mean-
3 years to implement those projects, and I don't know how many calls I had to make to NSTAR saying, can you extend that deadline? Can you extend that deadline? And Michael Lesser running around with paperwork, I don't know how much, getting paperwork in, and that's just for the bucket that we had.
But maybe it would be something different, David. Maybe it would
Right.
be, energy efficient windows in some town building, or it would be, all the patrol
Yeah,
cars would be
I-
Priuses or something. I
Right.
don't know. Just,
And the person that's doing the well, I mentioned the project manager on the fire department HVAC is also helping me put together this townwide facilities plan. You know, and those, then we would be able to maybe justify or identify better projects to be putting forward to be requesting money. But right now, I don't know where that list
Well,
would
it sounds
even-
like the
even
committee's
be.
getting bogged down in implementing the spending of these monies, and much of that's tedious, but it seems to me some of their value added could be educating the various department heads to look for the types of energy savings opportunities that grants, should we have time freed up to go, could take place. And then those departments are saying, well, you know, CM&D, Ed says, well, I'd like to put in two or three waste oil furnaces at $8,000 a pop or whatever it is, and there's 24 grand. But he manages through you, the purchase and, dealing with the vendor, not volunteers after the fact. And so the volunteers are freed up to working with, I don't know who, to file for these grants. I don't know if the money's always there, but it sounds like there's a lot of money. The state certainly
It's
is
just every year
pushing that way.
they're funding it. They
and
want
they're
to give
refunding. Yeah, so,
incentive to the green energy program. But the reason why I mention it in this context is the energy committee is listed here as having 5 with 3 vacant and 2 unknown.
yeah.
And so if you have a committee that you don't even have a quorum on anymore, and they're all vacant, and 2 may be willing to continue to serve, maybe that this is an opportunity to expand the charge of the committee, or take another.
And we know they worked hard because they were in
Yeah,
here
absolutely.
fairly recently. And
this
there
is
there are at least
the
two active members, maybe more.
Yeah, it's a very good committee.
It's a great committee. They've accomplished wonderful things. This isn't meant to be critical of anybody. This is looking like we're having a problem recruiting people to that committee. And I'm being told on the state level that
We missed opportunities, perhaps.
Well, I wonder if, when we talked at some point about financial structure in town, whether a task for that structure could be identifying and coordinating grant opportunities. I mean, that's a revenue function for the town.
We're doing that next week, are we?
I think we're doing it next Friday.
I have it on a proposed agenda for next Friday.
what's next Friday?
Oh, when you need to set your meeting, and we were proposing Friday morning, June 27th at 9:30.
Hoping
I can't make
Yeah, my
Thursday
vote.
evening is the problem.
You're hoping to be
on my
on
vote.
the high seas?
Yeah.
You want to meet Thursday morning? I just can't meet Thursday night.
We just don't have a warrant.
Oh, we don't have a warrant, that's the problem, right?
Well, here's a question. What's the word on whatever took place today at the state? Any word? Because part of what was taking place was your ability to approve warrant.
Yes, and that's another,
Effect.
that's another item coming up later in the
Okay.
agenda, but
But if you don't have to worry about the warrant, I guess is what I'm getting at. Because if you
Well,
have the authority.
it passed the joint committee and is referred out to the House and the Senate to schedule votes.
Okay, so that's
And
the
from what I understand, that they intend to vote on it in this session.
Okay.
So when does the session end?
July 31.
So that would be
That would-
pretty soon.
Soon,
And
But
that,
not soon enough for next Friday.
no, no, not for next Friday.
And if we have to wait for Thursday for a warrant, is that what you're saying?
Well, the payroll part of it won't be available until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that's all.
You just have to come in the next day and review it, or,
Well, you all can have a meeting without me, too.
Well,
This is a pretty important meeting.
I can do Thursday morning.
I can't do Thursday morning.
You can't do Thursday morning?
I could do maybe Wednesday
I
morning,
think I'm going to be pretty much gone most of that week.
but you are?
Okay, this next week.
That's my hope.
Oh,
And last week, too, Paul's got a great thing going here. Oh, how was Parker's graduation? Good?
It was
Must have been tremendous.
We went all day.
Congratulations.
We went-
Congratulations.
We had to get there at 7 in the morning, and we went till 4:30 at night, sitting in the hot sun.
Paul, what about the following week? Are you back at all? I don't know, do we try to meet Monday? Just
Could do Monday
No.
night, Monday day.
What day is Monday?
the 30th of June.
Let's see, that,
That period is a
Going on
tough period to
vacation,
try to
so-
do stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's just Thursday evening,
Yeah.
I've got to...
Well, we have a warrant, which we can do desk approach as in the
We
past.
can just warrant if we can find a time
Yeah,
to meet. I
yeah.
mean, can people meet Wednesday evening, next Wednesday evening? Can we
No.
meet- Can we meet next Tuesday evening? I'm just
I'm trying to take the next 2 weeks off.
trying to take the next 2 weeks off.
It's my summer vacation.
Okay. So that,
You're not meeting with Paul if you meet.
okay, and what is it that we're...
We could do remote
Oh, we
participation.
could do remote participation.
That would be good. So we
Can
can
you-
do that Friday morning,
Can you remote in on a Friday morning?
next week?
We haven't done that yet, but that's a good idea.
Equipment's gone.
All right.
It's like equipment someplace, right, Diane? The equipment for remote participation.
Oh, no, I have it.
Yeah.
We have it, we're all set, we're ready to go.
So can you do 9:30 Friday morning, the 27th? It'd be exciting to do a remote time.
We did the future contract stuff remote a
That
couple of
worked?
times. It was great.
Yeah?
There was always somebody doing it remotely in the summer.
So when do you want to do this remote?
Friday morning, 9:30, next
What-
Friday
what
morning. whatever.
Calendar date?
27 of
27?
Yes.
There are only, I guess, 3 items on there. One was library request for Board of Selectmen to consider appointment of library building committee. Basically, you have to decide, do you want to jointly approve that committee with the trustees, or do you want to let the trustees appoint that committee as you did with the preliminary design committee that came up with the existing plan? And then deal with the appointments that are ready, and look at, we need to discuss about the financial team and the treasurer.
Right. Okay, so you're all right with that, Paul? And thank you for the flexibility.
Yeah,
Thanks. That helps out a lot. We'll make it quick. I think it'll be a quick meeting.
Does 9:30 work?
It works for me, if it works for Paul.
It's
You'll
just,
still be able to get on the beach in your Speedo by 10:30.
if that's where I'm at, then it would work, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
and the
Paul.
reserve transfers. I mean, it's a pretty important meeting.
Well, we should have the reserve transfer information. That's another reason doing it Friday morning makes sense, because...
Because what we have so far is just preliminary guesstimates
Advisory would be
Advisory.
approving on the 25th.
next week. Yeah, okay, yeah. But don't they prefer to approve after we've approved our requests?
No, I thought it was vice versa.
No.
I mean, that didn't make sense, but what I was told, that you wouldn't be able to approve it until after they approve
I
it.
thought it was our request for reserve fund transfers signed by us going to advisory for their approval.
Yeah, I thought they had to approve it and have to come back for you, vice versa. So I have a list of what in this
I know, but
packet.
there's a form that we could authorize Mike to sign.
Well, we have it on today's agenda, so if we want to
Yeah,
wanna talk about it, we
deal
should
with
talk
because
about
I
it.
think,
I have the form in my
right,
desk.
am I correct,
Well, let's have
Diane, that
that.
that's the process?
I believe that they have to approve our.
We're
reserve
making the
fund. Then we bring it
request.
to- Then we bring it, they bring it to.
Well, let's not take a risk, let's just do it, and then if we need...
Yeah, because, I mean, what advisory told me was,
Well,
there's no point in the selectmen talking about the reserve transfers until after the advisory meets
Well, if that's their guidance,
That's
then
why
that's
I
fine.
scheduled it that way. But
I don't understand that at all.
that doesn't make sense. No, you're right.
We approve.
We're
We
the
make
executive
the
branch
request.
of the town, and the town meeting and advisory, which is part of town meeting, is the legislative branch. So just like it should be the President of the United States who proposes what is needed for his departments to Congress, rather than Congress telling the President where money ought to be spent. It should come from the executive branch. So the town administrator should put together a total package, take responsibility for all reserve fund transfers, figure out how we afford it and what's the best way to fund it, whether it's a Chapter 77 transfer between
Three
departments,
departments, yep.
or whether it's coming out of the reserve fund, or whether it shouldn't be spent at all. That initially should be a town administrator function. We should bring it to the board. The board should either approve his judgment or not, and only those items that we've approved should.
Go to advisory for
Right.
action.
All right, so let's
It takes both of us to.
let's look at this page, then. Let's pull that, we've got it in our materials.
Which page?
It's
It's like
unnumbered,
the
but
stuff
it's
that was just
it's
passed.
the one that says reserve fund transfers, yep.
And we don't know of any, would you call them Chapter 77 or the departmental transfers? We don't have any of those, do we, that identified? Yeah.
Well, on these transfers, I have to say I was most impressed with questions that, Peter, you asked about the police overtime and the study and reports that
Yeah.
were back. So I continue to be very appreciative for your financial contribution to this board and to the town.
Thank you, Paul.
Amazing questions and good answers, and quite informative. So it does turn out that the Pittman program is saving us money. But because we're one officer down, there is a need for overtime, to kind of summarize the.
Yeah, so we had somebody at the academy for 6 months, and we had somebody subject to surgery and injury and so forth. So those are reasons why our need is greater than we thought even just 2 months ago at town meeting.
And on the town clerk's item about the tabulating device, she was in here for that,
We approved that last
Approved that.
last week.
and we approved that. It is going to be a good addition to the voting on behalf of the town. So that leaves only the town accountant item.
That piece was basically the admin assistant that was doing payroll, left, and the vacation was paid.
When did that happen? That
It was in the-
back-
It was in the current year,
It
though.
was in the fall,
Right.
right? But we're doing this, we didn't
We didn't budget
do a
it.
supplemental or any of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we're just figuring that out now, that's all. That's $2,000.
I mean, there are a number of things feeding into that $2,000, so a number
Yeah.
of moving parts on it.
So I'd move to approve.
We should say what we're approving, right? The
Yes.
2,025 for the town accountant, 7,000 for the town clerk for the AccuVote tabulating, 20,000 for unanticipated police overtime, $2,100, which is a net number on police expenses.
And so this is a request for the reserve fund transfer from advisory's reserve fund, which is a budgeted amount. They have 38,000, nearly 38,000 left. This will leave them with 6,500 roughly in the balance, and this carries us through the end of the year. Presumably, there'll be nothing further that'll come forward that needs to tap into the remaining 6,500, so that 6,500 will be a turn back to the town at the end of the year.
Under,
And they budgeted a larger amount for next year as part of the, no need for cash.
under number 3 in this packet, proposed reserve fund transfers, there was a possibility today of some legal bills coming in, but And we were going to try to bump that Abbey Road appraisal thing for a reserve fund transfer because of the unexpected legal bill
But
that
didn't we
came
just see
in.
an email that said that legal, the analysis of legal, was
Yes,
that there was quite a bit left
yes.
based on what was asked for supplemental?
So
We
you
were-
can just-
We were good and in the clear, which I'm sure would cover that amount, at least
Yeah.
based on what we were last,
Yeah,
just
so-
reported on.
So you can cross this number
Okay.
3 off. That's,
Great,
so the list that you have would be
the
the
complete
list
list.
that we would request.
And so what we need is a form to sign, or I would amend the motion to authorize the chair to sign the form on behalf of the Board of Selectmen.
Second,
The amendment, friendly amendment. Or,
didn't you make the first motion, or did I make the first?
you made the first motion, so
So
I
you're
make a
amending-
friendly
I
amendment to
accept-
your motion.
As the mover, I accept the,
Do we have a second for the motion as amended?
second.
Okay, all in favor? You got all that, Diane? No?
Yeah, Diane's head's spinning over there.
Over and over.
All right, that's good, we got that out of the way.
Good, thanks. Thanks, Peter, for pushing that issue.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that I had my understanding was backwards.
Well, not too late to fix it is
We
is
got
a
it.
good thing.
We
If
solved it.
If we'd walked out of here without doing it, that would have been tough. So,
Yeah. So the rest of this is more reading matter, would you say?
yeah, the one thing we didn't get to, I don't think we ever got to the page that David actually had the appointments we were thinking of trying to do tonight, but I think we can do those next week, right, David?
We can, I can just, if you had any edits to that, but otherwise I would just attach this page to the agenda, except for, so item B was an issue that I didn't want to do the appointment tonight because we hadn't notified those people who were interested in that.
I think we should hold that for a separate night when we're all here and when we can have folks from that group who've asked us to be part of that discussion come in. 'cause
I would
it's a bigger
specifically
issue.
request you.
You don't want to be there. I know you're
Yeah,
So please,
I'd like to call it in Friday, too.
I don't think it should be next Friday, though. I definitely don't.
So we'd be looking at like
A
July
future
10th.
meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
And David, there was another, the Public Safety Committee, yeah, as the charge went, it's a little bit different than what you have put down here, right? It's not the BOH administrator, it's a BOH designee.
Yes.
It's not the COA director at all.
Right.
It is the traffic safety chair designee.
Right.
Don't
And
try and
two
rewrite the
folks.
motion now. It's already made and
Yeah.
seconded, and it's in the minutes.
No, I'm not rewriting the motion, I'm rewriting the list he's got here of who's on it, that's all, I'm not rewriting.
Yeah, I'll go back and edit this.
And you might have another, more lines to add to the bulk of the
There are,
talk by
yeah.
then, right?
Yeah, and the other one on here is number 5, Farm Pond Advisory Committee, where you have one name, but I think we got an email earlier this week from the committee itself with another name
Jackie Mann.
on it, yeah.
She's
That's number 4.
I mean,
You shouldn't mention.
So one is, 5
Sorry.
is a 1 year,
Okay, I
and 4
missed
is
4, gotcha,
3
gotcha,
years.
okay.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so,
and again, these are uncontested seats
understood.
and reappointments.
All right, so that's all you have right now, but this could be beefed up even further between now and Friday.
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And I like this format that you have, so that we can,
A little
Yeah,
clearer.
the materials are improving, this is good, this is really,
yeah.
We're trying.
no, that's excellent, David, it's
That's
very
good.
logical, flows through. Okay.
You have this on our list?
Town
Yes.
Administrator report, yeah.
Under the town
The
administrator
action items.
report,
Oh, okay, but we still had one other item to talk about?
Yeah, employee professional development
Yeah.
policy. Do
You wanna
talk
go
about
back on that?
I mean,
we're going to go back to talk about that.
We can go back to that, however you want to do it, just following the page.
Well, why don't we bang it up? No.
Well, we can talk about that now, yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
Basically, off and on, we see different reimbursements come through on the warrant. We see different costs for memberships, different trainings, conferences, seminars, and at different times they come through the warrant. So we have no, there hasn't been any real control other than the budget process. Once a budget is approved for training and professional development, it's been left up to the department to expend those those funds for those purposes. And when we get it in a warrant, it's pretty much, it's after the fact. So I think that's the complaints that I've heard from the board on what we could do to address that. So the only way you could get out in front of that is to have some sort of policy on how they can use those line items for professional development. Or you wait and do a whole review of each of those lines, you know, the budget process, and make them submit what it's for and come up with the amounts at that point. But I was looking at Framingham, they had a policy on professional memberships, and that's why I included that maybe that's something to start from. And you can see there is an authorization for absence, so if there's an absence from work or travel, basically that had to get approved for whatever you were going for. But I know also it's been questioned about mileage reimbursements.
But before you leave the professional memberships business, that's, the mileage is a little different. Let me just put my lawyer's hat on for a minute and say that the state ethics law prevents someone from authorizing money to be spent on themselves. So if you have a department head who wants to join the Caribbean Pina Colada Club and put that in as an expense,
You got caught. Which department head would be that exactly?
the way things are going now, the department head's approving it. And that process is actually illegal because under the
I
state...
thought we had addressed that, though. I thought we fixed that part, haven't we, David? I thought you were approving department head expenses. Am I wrong about that?
For like conferences and stuff
Yeah.
and memberships?
Yeah.
I haven't had any come through this year. I mean,
Okay.
normally they're paid all July.
I remember seeing a couple of warrants that kicked back to department heads who had items in there where they had to be further authorized, I thought. I remember seeing that.
Well, if they were reimbursements.
But I
But
interrupted
the
your
idea,
general point,
the
yeah.
idea is to have a policy that would tell everybody to avoid people making mistakes that might turn out to bring them into exposure to
Being-
prosecution.
Yeah.
We ought to have a clear policy that department heads can't, it should say right up front, department heads cannot authorize money to be spent on department heads. Only the town administrator can do this. And this should apply not just to department heads, but across the board. Particularly needs to apply to elected officials, because they're the ones who are very exposed to using their budget in a way, unintentionally, in a way that could expose them to somebody filing a complaint,
Ethics complaint, right?
Yeah.
an ethics
Yeah,
complaint.
yeah.
So all of that should be centralized in the town administrator.
Well,
For him to have that authority in a meaningful way, needs to be some standards so that department heads and elected officials and everybody throughout the town can refer to it. So before they decide they're going to join the Pina Colada Caribbean Club, they can look at it and say, well, gee, the town administrator doesn't have that on his approval list, and so therefore maybe I shouldn't join that particular club, and maybe I should limit my activities to things that he will approve.
Yeah, yeah, from the legal, if I could jump in, just to add, I put on my financial management hat as opposed to the legal hat. I'm with you on the same page, Paul, with the legal thing. What prompted it was seeing one of our department heads, we were reimbursing the cost of an overnight seminar and hotel and I don't know what else. And I didn't even know, and it was a department head that ultimately is one of ours. And I didn't even know the department head was out of town. And so it prompts you to think, well, wait a minute, we just went through a budget cycle, $25 million budget, and not one question was asked at town meeting, and very few questions were asked about it at advisory, except for the questions from advisory. There were hardly any holds. And so we can't, so the argument, like you said, well, it's budgeted, if somebody's got the monies in their budget, then that should be enough. From my perspective as with the fiduciary responsibility we have as selectmen for the town, and because we ultimately, the buck stops here and it's not a thing running around with four legs, it seems to me that we can and should establish some better policy that enables us to have us, either directly or through David, the town administrator, weigh in on somebody coming forward and say, I want to go to this place and do this seminar for these particular reasons. And I think there's some form to work with in here that starts that process. It's missing the key, how will this benefit the town? And then after the fact, I'd like to see the town realize its investment by some sort of formalized report from the individual of what they learned, what they did, how it benefits the town. I think that helps us, be sure that our money's being wisely spent.
Some places have, they'll authorize, all departments can, the town is a member of Mass Municipal Association, and there are subgroups in that, like there's a Selectmen's Association, there's a Clerks Association, there's a Managers Association, and they would give a blanket to attend those kinds of conferences and those kinds of trainings. But if it was an out-of-state travel or a separate group like Government Finance Officers Association, which is a national organization that holds conferences around. If someone was going to attend something like that, then they would have to get approval, but not if they were going to, the accountant's organization.
For example, we heard tonight the chief talking about two of our guys are at active shooter school, right? Now, I don't know what that costs. Yes, it's budgeted. Yes, it's critical that our guys get training. And I don't doubt that we'll get some sort of feedback of what they learned without telling the specific tips that they use. But, a report back to us would be valuable, I think. So
And that is one that actually the chief, that question was asked during budget, and the chief told us that was one of the things he was spending that money on.
Yes.
Was to send two people to active shooter school. So
We already knew
in
about
that case, we knew about it. I see that as an authorized,
Yeah.
implicitly authorized expenditure anyway.
Yeah.
But your point is well taken.
So I'm just suggesting we somehow, and maybe David has given us some ideas, I think those are all good. If we're of like mind of some sort of pre and post weighing in and reporting in for anybody and everybody, including elected officials who don't fall under our wing, but they do fall under our wing because we're residents and they work for us. And we're the only ones they are accountable to.
Just add
As
one more point. It's to the benefit of the taxpayers that we have educated people who are up to date.
Absolutely.
So professional development stuff is important and should be encouraged. And so I don't want to burden the process by making it difficult or to have somebody decide, I'm not going to do it because it's too much.
Too much of a pain in the neck, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this business about reporting before, reporting after, and maybe even having to come to a selectmen's meeting and justify it, that may be a little too much. But I am interested in sort of a standardized, this is the kind of stuff that you should be spending the money on, and specifically get the town administrator to sign off on it so there is no exposure to any violation of law. Those kinds of things, I think that would be a service to both the
All
community
parties.
and to the department head or elected official.
I'm very much in favor of having those kinds of, first, just to step back. So we're a budget constrained town, and we're a small town, and we're a fairly tightly staffed town, which means that anytime anybody is out of the office, when we saw with the police overtime, we're either not getting something done that should be getting done, or we're spending more money to have somebody else covered. So in some ways, there's some component of this professional education that's really almost a luxury, and it's a luxury that at this stage in Sherborn's history, maybe we really can't afford, or at least afford as much as in an ideal world we would like to see everyone who works for the town be able to professionally develop that way. There are going to be certain things that people need to do, maybe to keep a certification. They legitimately need to do it. But there are also going to be courses and professional information that they can get online, that they can get from tapes, that they can get from information that's available at the library. We don't have to be subscribing to periodicals for individual departments if people are doing that. We don't have to be traveling out of state. We don't necessarily even have to be traveling in-state all the time. And I think there should be a check on those kind of expenditures. It's unfortunate, but we're basically in a mode where extra time and money spent on professional courses and things like that, while they may be beneficial to the person who's taken them, we have to ensure that they're also beneficial to the town. And the only way to do that, I think, is to have somebody ask the questions and have someone, probably the town administrator, make a educated judgment about whether that's a worthwhile expenditure for the town, not just for that person. And we want to attract good people. We want to make sure they can continue to grow as professionals, but we also want to make sure that the work that needs to get done gets done, and that we keep our budgets in control. And that's so I agree with you, Paul, on the ethics issue, but I also think we do have to have some substantive control over who's going to what.
Well, I agree in part and disagree in part. I would encourage, I want to have a staff that's professionally up to date. And I think we require it, in my role on the state medical board, we require continuing medical education courses. The Board of Bar Overseers encourages continuing legal education. When you've got laws that are changing all the time, you've got new developments happening all the time, people need to keep on top of that. And saying that they can go to the library and get a course, that's really not the same thing as going to Department of Revenue as a course for financial officers. If they go to that, they'll find out what new laws to look at and so on. The big issue to me is not really going to the course, because the course cost is, what, $50. It's whether or not they get paid to go, and whether them going is going to require us to hire someone else or pay someone else to cover a period of time in which they are not here. Those are really the cost drivers. Courses themselves tend to be not very expensive. Certainly if they're going to the Caribbean on the Pina Colada Club, there's travel expenses, there's hotel expenses, may or may not benefit.
Well, my issue is mostly out of town, is really where the dollars add up. And it's not just whether
It's
we're
mileage,
filling
it's
somebody,
overnight,
it's
it's
mileage,
meals.
it's all that stuff. And it's also, just like Mike said, if they're not here, that means the work that they would otherwise be doing isn't getting done, and we're likely to be paying. It's not like they're using vacation or other time to go to these things. So they're on the job, but they're elsewhere, in perhaps a resort setting or otherwise. And the question is that the luxury, as Mike used the term, is that a luxury or is that a necessity?
I mean, we have, in the school system's a good example. We have teacher in-service days and we have teacher training days, but on those days, the kids don't show up. So it's not like there has to be coverage most of the time for that. The system is set up in a way that kind of education can happen during downtime for what they usually do, and it's really important for teachers to have that kind of training in service days. So if we can't do that, we've got to be really careful about what's authorized. And I think David has a pretty good grasp of what would be important and what wouldn't be important. And I also think that at least within the Selectmen's departments, we should be careful in the budget setting time to make sure we know what it is we're budgeting for, and I think that's also true of other offices, the other offices in town that we don't control the budgets of. I think we should weigh in on those budgets.
Well, while there may be some disagreements over how much scrutiny there should be, I think we're all in agreement that there needs to be some kind of authorization for the town administrator in some kind of formal way, which he doesn't have now.
Yeah, so do
And
you
I
think you have a
we-
good sense, David, of, given the, the sensitivities that each of us have expressed, to come up with something that might be workable
Yeah, so
in a
on,
future meeting?
for the meeting on the 27th, we could, I could bring back something that's covers basically financial controls for how things should be approved before they are incurred or appear on a warrant.
Yeah, the two elements that are needed is one, something that authorizes you to do this, and number two, some objective standards so that department heads and independent officials pretty much know what the standards are in advance. So their
Yeah.
time isn't wasted, your time isn't wasted, and there's an element of objectivity to it.
I'd like to wrap it into, I've included education, professional development licenses, certifications, memberships, conferences, training, courses, continuing education, paid time on out-of-state travel, mileage rate, travel reimbursements, format of reimbursement requests, and requirement of all invoices would cover about a number.
99.4%.
Do you have publications in there also? We've had a couple, I know we've had a couple of department head contracts where it's built in that they can get memberships and professionally appropriate memberships, and I believe I saw publications in those.
You're right.
So, that's easy pickings. I would also say just, and this is
Subscriptions.
an authorization for David, that's something to keep in mind for budgeting process. I'd like to do zero-based budgeting on this item when our departments come along. I'd like them to justify from the ground up how much money they're putting in that line item, not incrementally increase it from the year before. I think we need to start fresh thinking about the subject.
I do know that the CM&D specifically, he checks to see how much the license is going to be this year, and he does have it broken down. I know we look at that at the budget process. I think,
Licensure is less of a concern, but it's something
Right.
that's unavoidable, really.
I'm just saying, that's pretty much the only thing they have. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you on what you just said, because I do, from a policy point of view, want to have the public get the benefit of people who are trained with up to the latest state-of-the-art ways of doing business. So,
Well, wouldn't the budgeting process, to the extent, Paul, that they put nothing in, and they should be getting something, they should be doing something,
Or vice
would hopefully
versa.
come out of, yeah.
But I don't know if you're, I don't know if you need to pass a budget policy. I mean,
No, I was saying that more as just my personal.
When we
view
do.
Is when we start looking at budgets.
Right.
In 6 months or whenever that is,
right.
I would like to start with a zero in that line item unless somebody's justified why it should be higher than a zero. And I expect most departments it'll be higher than zero.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but if it's justified.
One other line that just reminded me was the postage. How I guess postage used to be centrally budgeted, and now it's all distributed among departments. So when we see mailings or townwide mailings, it's after the fact. So I know I had noted that I wanted to bring back some sort of townwide mailing postage policy, or during the budget process, pull all the postage back to a central.
you could pull all the professional training to a central budget. So rather than anybody
That's
having
interesting.
Yeah.
any budget,
Yeah,
just
I like
have
that.
one under the town administrator.
Yeah.
So if, let's say there's 10
Have to
departments,
be
each with
non-school
1,000.
related, they have
Right,
their contractual.
One item for 10,000.
School's not the issue on that.
No.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
So the other part of it, though, that I talked about, and maybe it's, above a certain threshold of out-of-town travel, that we get some sort of report back, whether it's a written report or they come before us, just to, for the record, that here's what we learned.
Out of town, that's.
You know, actually coming before us is great, because if you have to have a written report, that takes time out of your day to write a report that we're going to read and
Yeah.
you dismissed in 10 seconds.
Fine, I'm just, something.
The problem with out of town is that we're not Boston. I'm not aware of any training programs that are produced by Sherborn for Sherborn.
No, above a certain
Everything's gotta
goal.
be
So
out
if
of-
there's overnight travel and they spent $1,000, it costs $1,000 for the whole junket as a threshold. Anything $1,000 or more, we should, I'm suggesting we have some sort of policy that says that they report to the town.
Do we have any
By way
for
of-
$1,000?
by way of-
That sounds like a high number.
Yeah, I
Maybe it's a high
think that's a
number.
high number.
Maybe it's a high number.
I think,
$250 or something, isn't it?
Yeah, pick a number. I mean, I'm just saying.
I would say if somebody's looking at a $500 or $1,000 expenditure to attend a conference, that you would want a specific request and report back
Yeah.
from that conference.
To come before the Board of Selectmen at a meeting?
Well, it's informative. It's a big ticket amount. It's going to come through the warrant.
Yeah, I
Be
mean,
looked at
you can work out
anyway.
the details of this, David. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
that's not maybe that's excessive. I don't know. I would suggest that if it's okay with Peter and Paul, that you present us next week with the details of.
Yeah.
I mean, we did have the police chief come in when he went to a training to present.
Yeah, I thought that was
Results
valuable,
of-
right? That was good.
Right.
We didn't have to twist his arm to get him in here, do
He's very well spoken, so that's good.
All right,
Lucky
good.
on that.
That's really all I was
That was good.
suggesting to consider on that.
So I'll pull a draft together and try to get that on. Well, I will have it on the agenda for the 27th and try to get it
Good.
flushed out.
Excellent.
TA's report.
Under the TA report, I was just giving an update on the capital items, where those are at, the capital projects. I don't know if we want to walk through everyone individually as we did.
You want to tell us what's
Last
changed
time.
since last time?
Well, the big things are the fire department HVAC, that's been proceeding. The wrap-up time is estimated to be in September, and that's pretty much just because of the amount of time it takes to order the equipment, get it in, and then schedule the install and work around schedules. But that's going well. The transfer station paving, they said they'll have that design completed within the next 2 weeks, and then we can look at putting that design down. I mean, installing that drainage and then doing the cap. Carol Rubenstein and Ed and I were up at the transfer station Monday checking things out and seeing how it could be cleaned up a little bit. There's a big container up there full of metal, a rotting kind of container stuffed with metal, and I think we're just going to have the whole thing taken
Carted
out to
away.
Framingham Salvage and just have one container up there for that.
But you said in this report that the design was going to come by June 16th?
2 weeks
Um,
from June 16th.
Yeah, I thought it was 2 weeks from June
It's 2 weeks
16th.
from June 16th.
Okay.
That was the
That was a
date I got the
question.
information.
Yeah,
So-
June 16th is when we updated
So we
that.
expect that paving will be done this summer.
Yeah, that's as soon as possible. That's
Yeah,
a
that's
highly visible
a
project.
priority
that-
for
yeah,
myself.
Yeah,
Particular.
Can I just
we are.
jump back to the ladder truck
Yeah,
that's on this page? I just remember it was represented at advisory that a group would be part of the determination of the truck and the equipment and all of that. It wasn't a contingency that was voted on by
No.
town meeting, but it was a representation. I'm just wondering if any of that's likely to take place, that this smarter group will be part of
well,
the,
they're pulling together specifications,
yeah.
if those specifications end up meeting an MAPC bid that's already existing, and that they can make that work, then you don't have to go through the whole RFP process. If we're going through the RFP process, that by state law requires there to be a selection review committee that I would have to appoint, and we would have to come up with the selection criteria and whether that's,
And that's where that would take place.
yeah, and that's where that group, and I have talked to a member of advisory and a member of the Capitol Building Committee, and the fire chief would naturally be on that
Yeah.
selection committee. But they would have to meet to decide that selection criteria before we post the document.
All right, great.
Farm pond management plan, they were out on the pond and collected data. They'll be back in August to collect additional data. The town computers that was approved, that's almost complete. The petition to the legislature, both of those petitions were heard today and referred out. The warrant signing authority, once that's approved in the House and the Senate, that is,
Effective.
yeah, that's all that we'll need.
And the governor signs it.
That's what, yeah, there has to be another step, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the expansion of 3 to 5 members would be coming back for some sort of town meeting. The amendment to the personnel plan on my job description, that's at the Attorney General's office.
Just a comment on that, there's a specific statute that says the personnel plan items are not subject to Attorney General approval.
The personnel plan, the job description is, but the personnel plan is not.
It says amendment to personnel plan, waiting to hear from Attorney General's office. I'm just putting my,
We're waiting
Town
for him to hear
council
that he
now.
doesn't have the authority to review it, probably, right? Isn't that the?
but the point is you could implement it
Yeah,
immediately.
the change to the personnel plan.
Wait till August to hear from the Attorney General.
No. The amendment to the personnel plan was in regards to Lieutenant Bento's contract.
Oh.
The amount, the bylaw, the change to the job description of the town administrator was in the general bylaw,
And that's
not in the
gotta be
personnel
approved.
admin plan.
Yes, that has to be approved. I'm talking
Yes.
about the amendment to personnel plan.
Yeah, we have to just cross out waiting to hear from Attorney
So
General's
it's not
office, 'cause
submitted to
that's
the
not
AGs?
correct. No.
Okay.
It's one of those things that
Good catch.
the AG didn't want to be burdened with
Good catch on
reviewing
that.
every compensation change and all that kind of stuff. So the general courts exempted that.
The transfers we noted would be July 1st. Stormwater, we're talking with AECom, and they talked to Ed about the purchase of the GPS equipment, and they're working with People GIS to put that through.
And then, David, you're going to add to this, I guess, the water department consultant.
Didn't I already,
I don't know.
it is in there.
It's there.
Oh, it's up top? Okay.
Third from the
Third
bottom
from the
on the
bottom.
previous
Town Center Water Options Committee in progress.
There's that.
SRF planning grant
application.
application due 8/15/14.
Missing it. Okay. Gotcha. Yep.
Are there any other items that you think we should be routinely checking up on as far as these? I think we got most articles, capital items, and any other projects that are continuing. If you think of an item that should be added to the list, then
Yeah.
that we would like routine,
Well, I think after we talk
Update
about the
on.
financial department next week, there'll probably be an item relating to that.
yeah, that, yes.
Good.
So that's all I had. We already went over the upcoming meeting topics.
So do we move to adjourn?
Any
Um,
selectmen reports? No? Okay.
And we set the next meeting
And the
date.
next meeting is June
Friday.
27th, Friday morning at 9:30 a.m. in this room. I think. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. And so we have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you,
Good
everybody.
job.